In Marvel, you refer to this as magic. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76, The Power of the Space Gem. Focus your attention, use the space gem, and feel the spatial fluctuations around you. Space is mysterious, especially when there are no coordinates. Space movement will increase the consumption of mental power. No, that's not right. Too much mental power output can easily cause mental power exhaustion. Use your spirit to communicate with this gem. Yes, that's right, but you are still in the primary stage and can't move as you want. Use your mental power as a bridge to connect you to this gem. You can feel its ability, the huge power inside, and even its unique emotions. Ronan never thought that not only did the Ancient One not satisfy his curiosity, but also left him with a bigger mystery. In the following period of time, Ronan encountered hellish intensive training. This special training took a full 2 weeks. Half of his winter vacation was over. However, when the 2 weeks were over, Ronan did not feel depressed at all. Instead, he was very happy, because in these 2 weeks, the Ancient One taught him how to use the Infinity Gauntlet and the Space Gem. However, there are still some regrets. First of all, I don't know if it's his own problem or the problem of the glove itself. This replica of the Infinity Gauntlet seems to be less powerful than the original. Unlike the Infinity Gauntlet made by Tony Stark and his team, Fizz can only snap fingers, but cannot use the power of the Infinity Gems on it. But Ronan seems to be different. It can use the power of a single gem, but Ronan has not tested whether it can snap fingers. He dare not test it. The reason for the regret is that pirated copies are pirated copies. According to the Ancient One, the power of the Space Gem is far more than that, but it cannot be used because of the gloves. You know, in Kamatage, when the Supreme Sorcerer needs to use a time gem, he also needs to borrow the Eye of Agamotto and the secrets of Kamatage to control the forward or backward movement of time. The Eye of Agamotto is a real artifact passed down from generation to generation in Kamatage, and the Infinity Gauntlet held by Ronan is just a pirated copy. After testing these few days, except for the trick Ronan used at the beginning, which erased the mirror space of the Ancient One, the rest are relatively good. The first one is naturally the instant movement that Ronan has been training. That's right, when using space movement spells, the most critical point is that you have to have coordinates, especially when moving short distances and quickly. Coordinates are even more critical, because once there are no coordinates, people will easily get lost in the turbulence of space when moving in this space. Once lost, they will definitely die. The Space Gem directly omitted this point. As long as Ronan's eyes can reach, he can move instantly. But long distance movement, it seems very useless. The reason is very simple. It allows Ronan to achieve fast long distance movement, but the mental power consumed is calculated according to the length of the distance. In other words, the farther the distance, the more mental power Ronan needs to consume. Compared with the secret door, this move seems a bit useless. After all, the mana consumed by the secret door is borrowed from the ancestors. It is not your own, so you don't feel bad about using it. Especially Ronan's current secret door not only does not require the positioning of the hanging ring, but also does not require gestures. In addition, it does not require additional mental power. Therefore, long distance space movement was passed by Ronan. His evaluation was that it was not as good as his secret door. In addition to being able to move a distance, Ronan also used the Space Gem to create a small space. This space can store dead objects, but the passage of time is the same as the outside world. Although the space is not very large, it is more than enough to store some personal items. From today on, Ronan finally got the space ring that is essential for traversers, and no longer drag down many fellow traversers. This is also a very good news. Usually, the infinite gloves are thrown into this space by Ronan. When they are needed, Ronan only needs to tap the air very pretentiously, and then a gap similar to a space crack will appear. Then Ronan reaches in with an expressionless face and takes out the infinite gloves from it. Of course, Ronan can also choose to tap the air lightly, and then a ripple will appear in the air. The infinite gloves will automatically be worn on his hands. TSK. Anyway, Ronan can switch between the two methods at will, which can be called a pretentious weapon. In addition, Ronan has also developed two very powerful attack moves. The first move is space distortion. When Ronan focuses his sight on a certain point, the space around that point will be distorted violently, causing serious damage. Ronan borrowed this move from the pupil technique of middle school boy. Of course, the reason why it is borrowed is that Ronan also made improvements. On the one hand, the speed of space distortion is faster, and it can be completed in just a few seconds. On the other hand, Ronan can distort the space of 3 points at the same time. It is called 3-person trip for short. Well, Ronan named it to commemorate a great sage in the East. 1 distortion point is called single dog, and 2 distortion points are called double flying. Ronan felt very talented when he named it. When Ronan has a stronger control over the space gem, there may be 4-person trip, 5-person trip, and N-person trip. When developing this move, there was actually a small episode. This small episode almost cost Ronan's life. When Ronan used this move for the first time, he wanted to try out where the limit of this move was. So, he accidentally added a little more mental power. Then, the terrifying space distortion almost sucked Ronan in. If it weren't for the timely appearance of Ancient One and taking Ronan away from that place, Ronan would have at least lost his arms and legs. He might even have died there. If he died, who knows how many people would cheer there. After successfully destroying the first training site, Ancient One gave Ronan a strict order. In her absence, Ronan could no longer practice that move. Apart from this episode, the rest went relatively smoothly. The last move Ronan developed was also the strongest one so far. Ronan hasn't figured out a name for this move yet. Unlike the move of the threesome, this move does not destroy the enemy, but exiles the enemy. That's right, it uses the characteristics of the space gem to forcibly exile the enemy to an unknown space. And the strongest point of this move is that it is locked. Compared to the threesome, which can be avoided by people, or can use certain items to resist the distortion damage, this move can be said to make the enemy unavoidable. As long as you are locked, even if you stand behind some cover, you will still be exiled. When Ronan developed this move, Guyi finally smiled. In her opinion, from this moment on, Ronan finally opened up the true use of the Space Stone. Chapter 77. What about the agreement to be single together? In the 2 weeks that Ronan was away, many major events happened. For example, the front page headline of the Daily Bugle printed a criminal wearing a red and blue tights, a red mask, and a black spider printed on his chest. Well, the Daily Bugle claimed that this Spider-Man was a criminal. Although he was doing everything to punish evil, many young children regarded him as a volunteer policeman. However, official news has always been quite critical of him. You, an on-staff member, actually caught so many bad guys. What should we police do? Will the people point at our noses and scold us for wasting taxpayers' money? Or do we just slack off at work and do nothing? This guy has no overall view at all, and he is not a good person at first glance. Therefore, there has been constant controversy about whether Spider-Man is a criminal or a superhero. However, because other superheroes defeated aliens and saved New York and even the world, it is still vivid. So many people still have a good impression of this kind of superhero. At least the official now dare not make a judgment. Just waiting for the other party to quietly burst thunder, and then they will definitely be dealt with. In addition, there are many newspapers reporting the news that Tony Stark transformed into Iron Man on the street and then flew back in full view of the public. Such a high profile naturally caused a lot of criticism. Some people have even said that these superheroes must be controlled. There is no need to think that these people must be the mouthpiece of the government, expressing the government's opinions. Since Tony Stark turned into Iron Man, the government has been very envious of this kind of super soldier. In the end, after the two sides saw each other, Tony Stark gave in half a step, let his good friend have a set of battle clothes, which is now the Iron Patriot. But for other people's superpowers, they still want to get them. It is even said that the military has begun to propose to restart the matter of super soldier serum. Of course, in addition to these news, there is another news that has been dominating the headlines. That is about Mandarin. Recently, this so-called Mandarin has carried out terrorist attacks on the United States in many places. There have even been many explosions in the United States. Without exception, no bomb debris was found at the explosion sites. Anyway, the public opinion in the United States is to condemn, and condemn again. Because they can't find any trace of the Mandarin, and can't even find the means of explosion. Of course, all this has nothing to do with Ronan. As Christmas approaches, the entire Kamatage is almost empty. Most of these mages still have families, and the remaining people also have friends. And Kamatage is not a place for compulsory practice. You can come and go freely, as long as you don't pass on spells, and don't cast spells in front of others. Kamatage will not care about you. Even Cassilis is not in Kamatage at this time. So, among the remaining people, there are only Ronan and others. Of course, Ronan also left Kamatage, New York, Christmas Eve. Ronan, who has been practicing for 2 weeks, finally found time to rest. Because Kamatage is too boring, Ronan returned to his residence in New York, a villa in the rich area. There is no doubt that this villa is the asset of the Ancient One. In addition to the fact that the Ancient One restricts Ronan in terms of money, the rest are provided to Ronan with the best conditions, including the living quarters. Ronan usually lives in a nice apartment and comes here when he has a break. Ronan, Master Ancient One wants to see you. Just when Ronan was playing games at home, a portal suddenly appeared in the living room. No need to think, it was Wang. Ronan put down the game controller and couldn't help rolling his eyes. Wang, why didn't you say hello? What if there are other people here? It's not that Ronan is looking for trouble. What if a stranger comes to Ronan's house as a guest? Wouldn't it expose their identities all of a sudden? This is a very serious matter. How could there be someone in your house? A person who spent the first 15 Christmas Eves alone, and on the 16th Christmas Eve, there will be a female friend? Speaking of female friends, when he said the last sentence, Juan didn't continue, but looked at Ronan. That look was like a silent mockery. Fuck. Ronan couldn't help but curse in his heart. You are also a single dog. How dare you mock me? I'm younger than you, and I will definitely find the best one in the future. You are already old. You are still talking about me. Didn't you spend Christmas Eve alone? Even Christmas, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, you spend them alone too. Ronan retorted without hesitation. There is nothing good about the mutual spray between two singles. Anyway, the two of them have to ridicule each other almost every year, and now it has become a regular program. However, this time, Ronan never expected it. Wang actually played a dirty trick. Sorry, I have a date tomorrow night. After notifying you, I will go to book a restaurant. Wang patted his clothes, and Ronan realized that Wang was not wearing Kamatage's clothes. Instead, he changed into a suit. He looked like the Korean actor Ronan saw in his previous life. How about this suit? When I came here just now, I went to the suit store to pick it up. At this time, Wang no longer had the simple and honest look of the past, and there was a hint of cunning between his eyebrows. If Ronan had not firmly believed that with the Ancient One, the Skrulls would not dare to pretend to be the Wizard of Kamatage, then he would have suspected that the king in front of him was someone else's fake. Who is it? Who turned such a simple king into this? You are playing dirty, right? Ronan widened his eyes, seeming a little unbelievable. It's not that the king has not gone out on dates with others over the years, but today is Christmas Eve. There is no need to say what this means. On such a special day, the king actually went on a date with someone. This is what you want to ask yourself. It has nothing to do with me. It just so happens that I drove the car in the garage away first, and I will use it for a date tomorrow. Remember to hurry back to Kamatage. The Ancient One is still waiting for you. After saying that, the king opened another secret door and disappeared directly. On the other side of the door was the garage. With the roar of a car, a blue sports car rushed out of the garage. This blue sports car is also the private property of the Ancient One. Over the years, Ronan never thought that with the character and temper of the Ancient One, he actually liked to race cars. Ancient One plus supercar. Ronan couldn't understand this concept at all. Of course, what Ronan couldn't understand even more was that Juan was actually out on a date. Ronan had made a bet with Wang that, even if Ronan got married, Wang might not be able to find a girlfriend. But now it seems that Ronan is the only single dog left. What? You mean Ancient One? Haha. Anyway, Ronan didn't dare to label Ancient One as a single dog. He was afraid of being beaten. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 78 Shield. Warning. Warning them. After silently blessing the king 366 times in his heart, Ronan returned to Kamatage. In the entire Kamatage, only the door of the temple was open. Everywhere else, it was all quiet, with no one. Ronan stepped into the temple. As before, Ancient One was still drinking tea. As far as Ronan knew, Ancient One's daily routine was very fixed. In addition to eating and sleeping, he would go to instruct some trainee mages, and then sit here, to meditate and drink tea. As for reading books, forget it. I don't know how many times Ancient One has read these books in Kamatage. Teacher, you are looking for me? Ronan sat down opposite Ancient One skillfully, and took the tea brought by the maid. How is it? Is your arm healed? In the previous 2 weeks of practice, Ronan also used his injured left hand. If it were an ordinary person, that degree of muscle tear would not be healed for several months. But Kamatage's secret medicine is not a joke. It's okay, it's back to normal. Ronan shook his left arm. At least it didn't affect his gaming. That's good. At least I don't have to change your bandage every day. Guyi made a joke. During this period of time, Guyi had been helping to change the bandage on Ronan's left hand. So, she made such a joke. Then you are relieved, teacher. At that time, I was just glad that you didn't ask Juan to change my bandage. Ronan pulled the corner of his mouth. He recalled the painful experiences many years ago. When practicing close combat in the past, there would be more or less scratches and other scars. And the one who was responsible for applying medicine to Ronan was Wang. How to say it? Wang's technique is not bad, but too good. Not to mention the pain. Once when he was setting Ronan's bones, he almost broke Ronan's bones. At that time, Ronan seriously suspected that Wang did it on purpose. Well, come and take a look at this. Guyi smiled, as if he remembered the past. She took out a few photos from the side, and handed them to Ronan. The person in the photo was none other than Ronan wearing an Iron Man helmet. Judging from the appearance, Ronan was photographed during the battle in New York. So ugly. The photographer's skills are really average. Ronan curled his lips, obviously very dissatisfied with the man's photography skills. Even though he used the helmet to block his shocking face. What about his imposing figure? Not only was it not captured at all, but even from this angle, Ronan standing next to Steve Rogers looked like a scholar. He is a boxer. Each punch has nearly 20 years of skill. These are all surveillance footage. Of course it doesn't look good in the photos. Ancient One agreed with 2 sentences. It seems that she also thinks it doesn't look good. However, since she has taken out these photos, there must be something. Right? Teacher, if you have anything to say, just tell me directly. Even if they look for these photos, they can't find my identity, right? Ronan stuffed the photos into his pocket, ready to light a fire and burn them directly. These ugly photos must not be seen by others. Moreover, he thought about it, and decided to find the people who took these screenshots, and beat them up. Let them remember this lesson. In the future, if you take photos, you must take them well. Well, they haven't found out your identity yet. However, someone has been tracking this matter, and some of my friends told me his identity. Ancient One put the photo of another person on the table. Tony Stark. The photo taken was a picture of Tony Stark and Ronan looking at each other. It was probably taken by the surveillance camera when Ronan was saying something like Jarvis, attack mode. Is it him? He is so curious about me. Ronan looked at Tony Stark in front of him with a strange expression. He remembered that in the comics of his previous life, Tony Stark in a parallel universe was also the Sorcerer Supreme. However, the person in front of him was obviously not the Supreme Sorcerer. He might not even have any chance to learn magic in his life. According to my friend, he has been tracking your clue since the alien invasion. Of course, it's not just you. The defeated aliens were also sent to the institute. There is more than one person looking for you. A department called SHIELD seems to be tracking you as well. Ancient One threw out another piece of news. Of course, Ronan was not surprised that SHIELD, no, SHIELD, was interested in him. After all, a department like them wanted to control everything, and even wanted to use the space gem to make weapons, so they opened the portal, and led Loki here. To be honest, the fact that the Earth could be attacked by so many big bosses in succession was due to the contribution of SHIELD. They are a traitor to the world. Then, teacher, do you want me to deal with them? Ronan pointed to Tony Stark on the table. Ronan had no relationship with either Tony Stark or Nick Fury, nor did he have any so-called friendship with them. Once they find the secret of Kamar-Taj, neither Ancient One nor Ronan can tolerate it. So, when it's time to act, Ronan will act. No, it's not that serious. Although our Kamar-Taj is far away from the world, it doesn't mean it has never appeared. In the human world, there are also some people who have practiced magic here and returned to mortal life. Ancient One shook her head. She was not a bloodthirsty person. Of course, she was definitely not a saint. After all, if she was a weak person, how could she protect the Earth for so many years? Then what do you think, teacher? Ronan looked at Ancient One. Before he was not the Supreme Sorcerer, everyone in Kamar-Taj had to listen to Ancient One's orders. Ronan didn't want to break this rule, and he couldn't break it. After all, as the next Supreme Sorcerer, if he broke the rules, sooner or later someone else would break his rules. This is what Ronan didn't want to see. Of course, if someone really couldn't think straight, then Ronan could only let Wang sit on him to death. Go meet them, and give them a little warning. Let them know that continuing to track them down will not do them any good. Ronan glanced at Tony Stark's photo, then turned his gaze back to Ronan's face. Especially that department. They have too much power, and they will eventually find the mages who once studied here. So, we need to be more aggressive. Maybe there's not much else we can do, but we have to guarantee one thing. Guarantee the safety of all the mages in Kamar-Taj. This is the responsibility of the Supreme Sorcerer. Today is the first. It's too crazy. All kinds of silver alliances and gold alliances. The bosses are really awesome. Everyone's monthly tickets are usually used for the lottery, and you can even touch the red envelopes. When I put them on the shelves, everyone can use the money to subscribe. He. So, if you have any monthly tickets left, just wait. Chapter 79 An Unforgettable Christmas Gift. Ronan raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect that Ancient One would treat people differently. Tony Stark just gave him a small warning, while Nick Fury was a little more forceful. Should it be said that the protagonist and the supporting role were treated differently? Of course, this was just a joke. Ancient One's requirements can be summed up in one simple sentence. Not only do you have to beat them, but you also have to hurt some people. And you also have to break some people's ambitions, or even crush them into slag. Let them never dare to covet everything in Kamar-Taj again. The certain people here specifically refer to the Nazi shield. Although Kamar-Taj's mission is to protect the Earth, it is only to protect the Earth. Kamar-Taj has never said that it wants to protect the lives of everyone on Earth. Otherwise, when in Asgard, Ancient One would have turned against Odin and had a fight. For Ancient One, Ronan is his designated successor, the next Supreme Sorcerer of Kamar-Taj. So Ronan always has to practice these things. After all, a soft-hearted Supreme Sorcerer cannot be called a qualified Supreme Sorcerer. I understand. I will let them feel what despair is. Ronan smiled slightly, but soon found something wrong. How could he, a positive character, say such villainous words? It must be that he encountered too many villains some time ago, so Ronan became what he is now. Well, it's all because of those villains who didn't change their lines. The time is up to you, but it's best to be before the new year. Guyi only gave an approximate time. Of course, the new year she mentioned did not refer to January 1st, but the Lunar New Year. No problem, then tomorrow. After all, it's Christmas. Warn them on their most important holiday. I think their impression will be more profound. Ronan smiled. Without further ado, then tomorrow. it can be foreseen that two people will have a very unhappy Christmas tomorrow. Thinking of this, Ronan stood up from the futon. The one in New York was still turning on the game console, but he was thinking about completing the latest game in the next few days. Time is still very tight. Wait, don't rush. Guyi called Ronan. She took out a box from under the table and handed it to Ronan. Christmas gift. Although I don't celebrate Christmas, I still have to give gifts. After all, this is an annual custom. Of course, in a few days, when it's your birthday, I will give you another gift. Guyi looked at Ronan with a smile, and her tone was unusually gentle. When Ronan was young, his gifts were the same as other children's, and they were all found at the bedside the next day. Although Ronan's IQ at that time was a bit childish. But this year, Guyi suddenly changed the form, and Ronan was really a little uncomfortable. Okay, teacher, thank you for your Christmas gift. Ronan took the box and shook it in his hand, trying to look like an adult. But Guyi just smiled. The secret door opened, and Ronan stepped into the portal without saying a word, and disappeared in the temple. Looking at the place where Ronan disappeared, the smile on Guyi's face gradually disappeared. There was an inexplicable look in her eyes. She had been raising Ronan since she brought him home. For Ronan, Ancient One was both his teacher and his mother. Although Ancient One, as a mother, did not do a very good job on weekdays. But the same old saying still applies. After 16 years, even if you hold a stone, the stone will get warm. What about a person? Even though the two have always been master and apprentice, in fact, there is still a kind of kinship in their hearts. It's just that neither side has said it. Ronan, I hope you grow up quickly. Sooner or later, you will have to bear all this by yourself. Your future may be far more dangerous than I see. Ronan spent the entire Christmas Eve with the game. Ronan did not stop playing the game until the king came back. Of course, what Ronan said before was just a joke. For Ronan, it may be a bit difficult for him to get married in this life. How to say it, as a supreme magician, there has always been a default unspoken rule. That is, marriage is not allowed. Of course, unless the other party is also a magician of Kamatage. The reason is very simple. There will never be a wife who will accept her husband's daily work, which is to sit in one of the 3 holy places and silently guard the safety of the earth. Not to mention those dark creatures. The time they like to invade the earth the most is at night. Most people cannot accept that their other half may not see the sun the next day. Therefore, the position of Supreme Sorcerer has been passed down for so many years, and only a very few Supreme Sorcerers choose to start a family. Most Supreme Sorcerers can't even die of old age. Now, the Ancient One is just short of verbally telling all the magicians of Kamatage that Ronan is the next Supreme Sorcerer. Therefore, many magicians of Kamatage have lost their thoughts on this position. Wang is one of them. So, you braved the cold wind today and went to find a restaurant for a long time. You found that the seat was already booked, right? Ronan sat on the sofa and looked at Wang, trying to hold back his laughter. He wanted to say before, if he went to book a restaurant for Christmas on Christmas Eve, would there be a seat? As expected, the answer was just 2 words. Nothing. This was the best news he had heard this Christmas. Nothing more. I didn't come to you to make fun of me. I wanted you to give me some advice. You're so cunning. You must be able to come up with a good idea. Wang was obviously immune to some of Ronan's ridicule. After all, they had been together for 16 years. If he didn't make any progress, he would have been pissed off by Ronan's mouth. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Do you know how to use words? Do you understand English? If not, we can talk in Cantonese. Pay attention. It's smart, not cunning. Understand? Ronan was very dissatisfied with Wang's choice of words. What do you mean by cunning? Can you speak? Okay, smart, okay. Go and book a table for me. Whatever you say is what I want. Wang didn't seem to want to struggle at all. Seeing that Wang had no intention of responding, Ronan couldn't help but curl his lips. It was boring. Tell me first, what does she do? Does she have any habits? Can she eat oriental food? Ronan glanced at Wang and began to inquire about information inconspicuously. She. Wang opened his mouth and just said one word, but then he held it back. It seemed that there was something difficult to say. Let me keep it a secret for now, and I will tell you when we get further. The only question I can answer for you is whether she can accept Oriental food. Wang seemed a little embarrassed and didn't want to tell Ronan. Ronan rolled his eyes. Brother, you invited her on a Christmas date. Don't you know what the steps are between you two? You are still playing secretive here. Although he said so, Ronan still picked up the phone. A brand new phone. This is the Christmas gift from Guyi, the latest model of mobile phone, which is worth a lot of money. I have a good restaurant. The taste and environment are good. The taste has also been improved to a certain extent for local Americans. I think there will be no problem. Ronan said, dialing a number. After all, he has been in New York for so many years, and he still has a few VIP seats. Even if they all have Guyi's membership card. Chapter 80. You are called Mazafak. The next day, Wang, who got a table seat, went on a date happily. It was said that they would have lunch at noon, then go somewhere to play, and then have another meal in the evening. He stuffed a handful of dog food into Ronan's mouth. Since he didn't have a good Christmas, he would vent his resentment of being stuffed with dog food on other people. Yes, those two. This time, he also wanted to make the Christmas of these two people the most memorable day. If Ronan didn't have a good Christmas, they wouldn't have a good Christmas either. Oh no, if one of them didn't have a good Christmas, the entire shield might not have a good Christmas. So Ronan made a very careful plan. First find Mazza fake man and make the entire shield have a bad Christmas for the whole day. Then find Tony Stark and ask him and Pepper Potts to prepare a Christmas gift for them. Couple. Humph. Wait for death. Shield building. The famous Mazza fake man Nick Fury was sitting alone in the office. His one eye was looking at a plan that had just been submitted. Since the New York War, he has been in a state of trembling. Not only has he been under various pressures from the top, questioning him about the aliens, even some superheroes are very dissatisfied with him. The reason is very simple, because all this happened because S.H.I.E.L.D. was studying the cosmic cube. It is also because of this that, to a certain extent, Nick Fury has to take full responsibility. Among those superheroes, except for Black Widow and Hawkeye who originally worked in S.H.I.E.L.D., there is only one Steve Rogers who still has a little trust in him. But it is only the loyalty of a soldier. So, during this period of time, Nick Fury has been trying to find a way, until a proposal called Inside Project was placed on his desk. The plan mentioned many ideas, such as being able to monitor all mankind and take the lead in attacking dangerous targets before encountering danger. This will better protect the safety of the Earth. Of course, this idea is good, but it's a pity that Nick Fury is still hesitating. In fact, in his heart, he still agrees with this plan very much. Especially after he saw the video of the New York War that day, he wanted to pass this plan directly. Because, for the first time, he knew that there were magicians on Earth. When the man wearing the Iron Man mask appeared through a portal that was shining with golden light, and finally left in the same way, it made Nick Fury's crisis even worse. What if someone with such ability becomes a supercriminal? They can go anywhere, and even the surveillance cameras may not be able to capture their appearance. What should we do? Thinking about it, Nick Fury even picked up a pen and wanted to write his name on this plan. Oh, Mr. Nick Fury, I suggest you calm down. At this moment, a voice came from the empty office. Nick Fury was startled and subconsciously raised his hand and reached for the drawer on the right. There was a pistol hidden there. Don't move, or you will die. The next second, an object poked Nick Fury's back of the head. The cold and familiar touch made Nick Fury almost conclude that it was a gun. So, his hand stopped in midair. Now, let's play a game. Open the drawer on the right and throw the little cutie to me. What do you think? The voice sounded again, a very gentle, but slightly naughty voice, which made Nick Fury feel extremely dangerous. How did this person get in? You know, S.H.I.E.L.D. is almost the place with the highest security in the entire United States. In addition to the five-cornered building and the White House, if compared to single soldier combat, there is also Captain America in S.H.I.E.L.D. However, this person broke in quietly. This made Nick Fury very incredible. Of course, it was incredible, but his hand honestly followed the other party's instructions and took out the pistol from the drawer. Ronan took the pistol and weighed it with great satisfaction. Well, the real gun feels better. That's right, this person is Ronan. This time, he didn't come to negotiate terms either. Swish. The next second Ronan's figure disappeared again, and when he appeared again, he had already sat on the sofa next to him. Ronan was leaning against the sofa, with his legs crossed, wearing a classic Iron Man mask. In his left hand was Nick Fury's gun, and in his right hand was something that looked like a steel pipe. Tossing it around, Nick Fury's mind was in a mess. He couldn't figure out how Ronan suddenly got to the other side. And that cold touch just now, was it actually a steel pipe? How dare you play tricks on me? Nick Fury's face was gloomy, and his tone was very dissatisfied. Nick Fury hadn't been played like this for many years. Of course, his so-called gloomy face didn't show any changes in his expression. I'm not playing tricks on you, don't I have a gun? Ronan shook the pistol in his left hand, his tone very innocent. You. Just this one sentence, Nick Fury was choked and couldn't say anything. This is my gun. But Ronan didn't care about that. Whoever got it would own it. Are you the man that day? Nick Fury calmed down, and he also recognized Ronan's helmet. Because of this helmet, Nick Fury once thought that Ronan had some relationship with Tony Stark. Who on which day? You don't know anything, but you want to find out other people's secrets. Are you really not afraid of death? Ronan held the gun in his left hand. Under Nick Fury's gaze, he actually slowly twisted the steel pipe-like thing in his right hand onto the muzzle. This is not a steel pipe at all, but a silencer. But Nick Fury has never seen this kind of silencer before. You have never seen a silencer that can be adapted to various pistols, right? Ronan tightened the silencer, pointed the muzzle at Nick Fury, and closed one eye. His action made Nick Fury sweat coldly. Nick Fury quietly moved his right hand off the table and pressed the hidden button on the table. As long as this button is pressed, it means that Nick Fury is in danger of his life. You are really dishonest. Bang. An extremely weak gunshot sounded. Fire sprayed out from the muzzle and directly penetrated the table in front of Nick Fury. With inertia, the bullet penetrated the surface of the table and hit Nick Fury's thigh. Mazer Fork. The famous Mazer Fork finally shouted out his classic line under Ronan's shot. Please vote for me. Chapter 81. I really can't read minds. Nick Fury covered the injured part of his thigh and clenched his teeth. Even though it was extremely painful, as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., he couldn't shout it out. Because there was a video here. It's okay, you can shout it out, no one will laugh at you. Because before I came in, all the cameras in your room were destroyed by me. Unless your left eye is a camera, and it can penetrate the eye mask, and record everything today. Ronan moved the muzzle of the gun up a few centimeters, and closed one eye again. The target he aimed at before was clearly Nick Fury's side, wanting to give him a warning. But unexpectedly, he missed the target. In fact, it was not Ronan's fault that his shooting skills were so poor. After all, which was doesn't use spells but only firearms? Then why not just call the gunman directly? What on earth do you want to do? If you want to kill me, shoot here. Nick Fury pointed at his head, and he almost drawled out this sentence. He didn't want to endure such humiliation at all. As the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., he was the only one who could point a gun at others. How could others threaten him with a gun? This made him feel humiliated like never before. Don't worry, the game has just started. Why are you in such a hurry? Ronan lowered the pistol in his hand and gently unscrewed the silencer on it. This silencer was taken from Tony Stark in the world of Avengers 4 by Ronan. It is Tony Stark's latest invention. Not only can it be adapted to various types of pistols, but the sound is even lower. Most importantly, it does not reduce the power of pistol bullets. Nick Fury was sweating all over at this time. He really couldn't figure out what the other party's purpose was. Kill him, or simply humiliate him, or because suddenly, Nick Fury thought of a sentence the other party had said. You don't know anything, but you want to explore other people's secrets. This sentence suddenly made Nick Fury suddenly realize. Do you know that I'm investigating you? Nick Fury said this sentence subconsciously. Ronan was slightly stunned, but the helmet covered his expression tightly. Even if Nick Fury wanted to observe his expression, he couldn't do it. I have to say that as the director of SHIELD, you still have some thinking ability. Ronan nodded, and in the eyes of Nick Fury, he actually threw the pistol aside. This action made Nick Fury dumbfounded. What on earth is he doing? Can't figure it out, right? Ronan looked at Nick Fury's expression and his teasing voice sounded again. Nick Fury was silent, his eyes staring at the helmet on Ronan's face. He wished he had a pair of eyes that could penetrate. He really wanted to see what the other person's true face was. Since you can't figure it out, then I'll tell you. You don't think I really don't know that you just secretly pressed that button with your right hand? Ronan crossed his legs and made a heart-piercing statement. He saw it? Nick Fury was stunned. Since he saw it, why didn't he stop himself? Are you really wondering why I didn't stop you and let you press the button? At this moment, Ronan was like a demon in the dark. This demon could not only see through other people's minds, but also drag the other person into the abyss with every word. Nick Fury felt as if he was seen through. The other party can read minds? Don't think about it, I can't read minds. Ronan shook his head and told Nick Fury the truth very sincerely. However, his words made Nick Fury more convinced that the other party could know what he was thinking. So what should I do? What should I think? And how should I protect myself? At this moment, Nick Fury understood for the first time what it meant to be weak, pitiful, and helpless. Okay, since you are so pitiful, I will reluctantly tell you the answer. The reason why I didn't stop you is actually to make you understand one thing. Everything you do is to let yourself slide into the abyss step by step. Ronan spread his hands like a villain. Not to mention, before coming here, Ronan had specially referred to the actions and language of several villains. It can be said that he has integrated the strengths of hundreds of villains. Dong dong dong. Just at this time, there was a knock on the door in Nick Fury's office. Look, are you here? If I don't let you send out your most elite troops and crush them one by one, how would you know the gap between me and you? How big is it? Ronan's tone was very humorous, but Nick Fury at this time seemed to understand something. From the beginning, Ronan was waiting for him to press that button, because only by pressing that button will the most elite agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. appear. Only then will Nick Fury be truly desperate. Dong dong dong. The knock on the door came again. Come in. Ronan shouted towards the door. The door of the office opened, and the figure of Black Widow walked in from outside. When she saw someone else in Nick Fury's office, she looked stunned. Did I interrupt your conversation? Maybe I can wait until you finish talking, then I'll come over. Although she said so, Black Widow closed the office door behind her. Ronan shrugged. It doesn't matter, you can do whatever you want. Looking at the familiar Iron Man in front of her, Black Widow narrowed her eyes. Captain. Now, just as she finished her words, a huge hole suddenly exploded in the ceiling. A round shield flew towards Ronan's face. Wow, the wall of your shield is so fragile, and your subordinates are too cruel. When Ronan said this, he was facing Nick Fury, and he didn't even look at the flying shield. The next second, bang, Black Widow, who was standing in place, suddenly flew out. The familiar shield hit her back, and a figure fell from the sky. This person was none other than Steve Rogers. Captain, can you be more accurate next time? Black Widow covered her waist and quickly came to Nick Fury. At this time, she still had the mind to joke. It seems that she is still very confident in their team. Sorry, I will be more accurate next time. Steve Rogers apologized casually, and then he focused all his energy on Ronan. He recognized this mask and this suit. Not long ago, they had resisted the alien invasion together. But today, they seem to have become enemies again. What happened? Please give me a monthly ticket. Chapter 82, 1 against 3, that's it? The two sides just stood there. However, their states were different. Ronan was still sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed, looking very relaxed. Steve Rogers and the others were looking at Ronan with vigilance, thinking about how to get Nick Fury out. Now, the whole building has been surrounded by S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. However, Black Widow was pessimistic about whether she could catch the man in front of her, because she had seen the other party's ability, the way they suddenly appeared and left suddenly, they couldn't control it at all. Unless it seems that everyone is here, then let's stop talking nonsense and get started. I have other things to do. Ronan stood up from the sofa, and in full view of everyone, he began to move his waist, wrists, and legs one by one. He even stretched himself. He looked extremely arrogant. Can we talk first? After all, we have protected the Earth together before. But why did you come this time? Steve Rogers stepped forward and protected the others behind him. He had seen Ronan's fighting style. It felt great when he was fighting the Chirita. But when the two sides were in a hostile state, Steve Rogers felt extremely difficult. I have told him the reason. You try to explore other people's secrets without knowing anything. It seems that the lesson you learned from the Cosmic Cube is not enough. So I came here this time to make you remember it. Ronan shook his neck. He did not hide his purpose. He came here this time just to hurt Shield and shatter all their fantasies. Steve Rogers looked back and chose to believe Ronan's words. Because Nick Fury had such a serious criminal record. I'm just protecting the safety of the Earth. Nick Fury's face was dark, and he had his own words. Hey, you obviously don't know anything, but you must put yourself in such a great position. Really stupid. The next second, before the word stupid completely dissipated, Ronan rushed up. Since he wanted to hurt them and wake them up, Ronan would crush them completely in their strongest aspect. There was no doubt that Ronan only wanted to fight in close combat this time. Steve Rogers' reaction speed was also very fast. The moment Ronan rushed over, he threw out the shield in his hand. Ronan ducked to avoid the shield and came to Steve Rogers in one step. He clenched his right fist, carrying a sharp sound of wind, and hit Steve Rogers' face directly. Bang! Steve Rogers raised his arm to block it, but the pain from his forearm surprised him. The opponent was so strong. However, Ronan's attack was far from over. He changed his right fist into a palm, grabbed Steve Rogers' forearm, and then turned half a turn, and his right elbow hit the opponent's chest directly. Suddened by this elbow, Steve Rogers' face changed instantly. With this force, Ronan threw Steve Rogers back and threw him out directly. Then, Ronan squatted down instantly, as if he had eyes behind his head, dodging several bullets flying from behind. Black Widow held the gun with both hands and kept shooting at Ronan. It seemed that she did not consider the ricocheting at all. Ronan dodged all the bullets with a Z-shaped step and came in front of Black Widow in an instant. Bang! Ronan punched Black Widow in the chest and sent her flying directly against the wall. Black Widow's back hit the wall heavily, then rebounded and hit the floor with a muffled sound. Steve Rogers came again with a shield, not giving Ronan any chance to breathe. However, Ronan's reaction speed once again exceeded Steve Rogers' expectations. He jumped high, and the left-hand shield attack with inertia was dodged by Ronan at a very fast speed, and Ronan grabbed the edge of the shield with his left hand. Then, Ronan stretched out his right hand and punched Steve Rogers one by one. Steve Rogers was not an easy man to deal with. He held the edge of the shield with his right hand and raised it up with both hands. Ronan's consecutive punches were all blocked by the shield. It should be said that the shield was made of vibranium. Under Ronan's almost full strength attack, it only had a little dent. On the contrary, Ronan's hand was a little hurt by the force of the shield's recoil. Ronan cursed shamelessly and immediately changed his strategy. He grabbed Steve Rogers' right arm with his right hand and swept Steve Rogers into the air with his left foot. Steve Rogers turned in the air, and it seemed to have its own sound effect. Fuck. Ignore. However, the sound effect lasted only a second, and Ronan kicked Steve Rogers in the chest, giving him a close contact between his back and the wall. Oh, of course, there was also a kiss between the front and the floor. The next second, Ronan turned halfway again and grabbed an arrow shot from the sky. Without even looking at it, he threw it towards Steve Rogers. Boom. A violent explosion sounded in this office. If Steve Rogers hadn't raised his shield instantly, he would have been buried in the explosion. Nick Fury, who was hiding in the corner, was dumbfounded. What kind of monster did he provoke? In just a few tens of seconds, the two main forces under his command were actually knocked down. Moreover, the opponent didn't seem to use the previous tricks. How strong is this person? Ronan bent his knees and exerted force, and jumped directly onto the desk, and then used the desk to make a second jump. Only a few screams were heard from upstairs. Then, Hawkeye, who had been hiding upstairs, was thrown down directly. Ronan jumped back to this office from the hole and gently patted the dust on his body. It seems that he still needs to work harder. After all, fighting with these little guys, he even got his clothes dirty. This is definitely not okay. With just this little ability, you dare to pry into other people's secrets? Ronan walked up to Nick Fury, grabbed his clothes, and dragged him to the center of the office. At this time, the blood from Nick Fury's legs was already all over the floor. If he hadn't taken advantage of Ronan's fight to urgently treat the wound, he would have probably fainted from excessive blood loss. Looking at Ronan's condescending look, Nick Fury felt for the first time what despair was. He had never felt this feeling, even when he met that woman that year. This was the first time he knew that there were such terrible people on Earth. Please give me your monthly vote. Chapter 83. You don't want to find a backer, do you? Who? What is your purpose? Nick Fury, lying on the ground, was already a little weak. Although the wound had been treated initially, the large amount of blood loss before had already made him feel deeply powerless, especially when facing such a powerful opponent. However, Nick Fury never expected that Ronan would actually raise his foot and step on the wound on his leg. The wound, which seemed to have eased a lot, was violently torn open again. Blood spurted out directly. Ah! Nick Fury screamed like a pig being slaughtered. His screams penetrated his office directly, and the agents ambushed outside the door could no longer bear it. The door of the office was directly rushed open, and more than a dozen people rushed in from the door with guns raised. Don't come in. Steve Rogers shouted at the door anxiously. Because he had seen Ronan's strength, these people coming in was no different from delivering food. However, it was all too late. None of the people who rushed in dared to shoot, because they were afraid that, if they were not careful, Nick Fury under Ronan's feet would be shot, and die in the hands of his own people. This is also where they died. Hey, you are only worth a few $100 each, why are you playing with your lives? Ronan sighed, raised his left hand, and aimed at the group of people rushing up. A blue light bloomed from Ronan's left hand. Run! Steve Rogers roared, and threw the shield in his hand directly to Ronan. Then he took a step, and followed the shield, and rushed towards Ronan. Unfortunately, his action was still slow. In the eyes of Hawkeye and Black Widow, a vortex visible to the naked eye appeared at the door. This vortex directly wrapped all the people who rushed in. The next second, the vortex rotated at a high speed. A huge suction force appeared in the rotating vortex. Almost at the same time, all the agents standing at that position flew to the center of the vortex involuntarily. Seeing that they were about to be swallowed by the vortex, "Grab the rope," Hawkeye shouted, and he raised his bow and arrow and shot in that direction. The arrows shot out with steel wire ropes were nailed directly to the opposite wall. These agents who were about to be swallowed up, as if they had grabbed a life-saving straw, grabbed the steel rope in front of them with their hands. This was their only hope. Black Widow also took action. She tied a rope to the window, and tied the other end to herself, and then she planned to pull all the agents out with her hands. It's a bit too late. Ronan grabbed the flying shield with his left hand, and then used this shield to directly repel Steve Rogers who was rushing towards him. His weak murmur seemed like the last scythe of the god of death. Crack. The taut steel rope was also shattered by the vortex, and the agents who were still struggling were instantly swallowed into the vortex. In a hurry, Black Widow only caught one of the agents. She could only watch as the other agents disappeared in front of her. No. Hawkeye roared, as if he was crazy, and shot arrows at Ronan crazily. He had been in S.H.I.E.L.D. the longest, so he had the best relationship with these people. When these people were swallowed by the vortex, his mood could not be described as anger, because he knew that those people were probably in danger. Hey, what are you doing? Why are you angry while chatting? Ronan easily dodged every arrow shot by Hawkeye, and even took the time to look at his system panel. Kill Hydra Agent, experience plus 10. Kill Hydra Agent, experience plus 12. Kill Hydra Agent, experience plus 7. Kill Hydra Agent, experience plus 14. Wow. I don't know if it's a coincidence or the fact. These people who came in desperately to save Nick Fury, without exception, are all Hydra people. If he didn't know that this boiled egg was still a positive character, Ronan really thought he had shouted the most classic phrase, "Hail Hydra." Think about it, Hydra people, desperately trying to save the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. This development seems to be really touching. Bang! Ronan punched Hawkeye away. This time, Hawkeye turned into a panda eye and fell asleep peacefully. Maybe there are Venus in the dream? Mazurfak. After seeing his elite being directly solved by Ronan, Nick Fury shouted the classic line again. This time it felt more powerful. It seems that he really didn't notice anything. Now he only knows one thing. From Nick Fury's perspective, all the actions of the Iron Man in front of him are undoubtedly a demonstration against him. Or in other words, it is revenge for Nick Fury's investigation of his identity. In the previous single-handed fight, he directly defeated the 3 most powerful people in their shield, 1 against 3. There is not even any sign of injury on his body. The only dust was accidentally stained when he went upstairs. The reason why the other party did this was to tell him that without using magic, none of you can beat me. Later, when the agents rushed in, the other party used the mysterious magic in an uncharacteristic way. This was also telling Nick Fury, you can't fight alone, and you can't fight in a group. And if he wants to use magic, all these people in SHIELD are noobs. Thinking of this, Nick Fury couldn't help but take a deep breath. At this time, one of his 3 generals had fainted. The other was also wounded and didn't seem to be able to play a big role. Only Captain America Steve Rogers seemed to have the strength to fight. But 3 people against 1, they were all defeated by Ronan one by one. What's more, Steve Rogers was the only one left. So, Nick Fury's only reliance now seemed to be the pager. Do you really want to call that woman? Subconsciously, Nick Fury touched his pocket. Hey, you don't want to call that person over? What's that called? Danvers? Carol Danvers, right? Ronan glanced at Nick Fury's actions and used mind reading again. At this moment, Nick Fury was in a terrible state. How could he know everything? No. Impossible. Judging from his current age, it is impossible for him to know what happened back then. But no way, you don't really think that I don't know about what happened in 1995? Is it that I don't know about the spaceship that fell from the sky? Or is it that I don't know about your so-called Pegasus project? Please give me a monthly ticket. Chapter 84. You have a backer, and so do I. Nick Fury's biggest backer, or the person he can rely on the most, is Carol Danvers. That is, Captain Marvel. If we remove the strength part and only talk about the simplest fighting power between the 2 people, Ronan can fight Captain Marvel for more than 100 rounds. Of course, we have to ignore the factors of appearance and age. After all, it is really difficult for a pony who has just grown up to pull a cart. In addition, if it is a serious strength match, Ronan is not afraid of Captain Marvel. Because he now has the space gem. Although he can't do it like Captain Marvel, he has transformed the power of the space gem into his own power. But, Ronan can run away if he can't beat it. Just like a man who is forced to drink wolfberry water every day, the only way to solve this problem is to escape from the clutches of those women. Similarly, Ronan can also run away, and he can run away quickly. What to do after running away? Of course. Find your own backer. Since Nick Fury can find a backer, why can't Ronan find his own backer? I beat you, and my backer beats your backer. No matter how I think, I'm invincible, so what should I be afraid of? Thinking of this, Ronan bent down, pushed away Nick Fury's hand, and took out a pager from his pocket. There was also the Captain Marvel logo printed on it. I don't know how this pager was made, but it can actually contact a person traveling in the universe on Earth. Of course, the communication delay is a bit too high. Is this it? Carol Danvers left it to you back then, so that when you are in danger, you can press the button to summon her back. Ronan shook the pager in front of him, as if trying to figure out how it was made. Every move he made seemed to be asking for Nick Fury's life. How do you know? Nick Fury always felt that no one else knew this secret, because there was no record of this incident in SHIELD, and he, Nick Fury, was the only person who knew about it. But today it seems that the other party knows everything. How do I know that? Don't worry about it, and I'm not interested in your broken thing. Ronan casually threw the pager to Nick Fury on the ground, and it hit him directly on the chest. Nick Fury stretched out his hand to catch it. However, a question also appeared in his mind. Since the other party knew about Carol Danvers, why did he give him the thing? Is the other party so confident that he can even defeat Carol Danvers? In Nick Fury's eyes,
Carol Danvers can no longer be called a human being. Her fighting power is indescribable. Okay, I have explained what I should explain, and I have sent a cordial greeting. From today on, I think no one will check my identity again, right? Ronan glanced at Steve Rogers, who was still on guard, but kicked Nick Fury with his foot. His mission was not to kill people, and he was not a bloodthirsty person. What's more, if he killed the people in front of him, especially Steve Rogers, the system would not provide him with experience at all. The reason is also very simple. According to the system's judgment, Steve Rogers is still considered one of his own. That is to say, after fighting for so long, Steve Rogers still doesn't think of himself as an enemy. Should we say that Steve Rogers has a heart of love? Ronan couldn't help but complain. But think about it. With Steve Rogers' personality, he definitely doesn't believe in Nick Fury. The reason why he is still working at S.H.I.E.L.D. is nothing more than that he is not adapting to the times. When the Avengers building is completed, he will also leave S.H.I.E.L.D. and work there. Therefore, compared to Nick Fury, who had made many mistakes without telling him before, Steve Rogers is more willing to believe that Ronan in front of him has no ill intentions. That should be the case, right? I see. Ronan's friendly negotiation worked. Nick Fury, who has always been ambitious and feels that he is concerned about the country and the people, finally bowed his head. Even though he is very unwilling at this moment. But, he can only do this. He can't beat him. What else can he do? Of course, if I find out that someone is trying to find my secrets, I will put all the blame on S.H.I.E.L.D. When that happens, I will come to visit you again. Do you understand? Ronan squatted down and looked at Nick Fury, whose face was extremely dark. This request was extremely demanding, and Ronan's meaning was very clear. Even if Ronan was not investigated by S.H.I.E.L.D., Ronan would vent his anger on S.H.I.E.L.D. However, in this world, there are generally only two groups of people who want to know Ronan's identity. S.H.I.E.L.D. or Hydra. No matter which group it is almost the same to put the responsibility on S.H.I.E.L.D. Understood. Nick Fury uttered another word. TSK. In order to survive, he has even developed a technology to revive the dead. So it doesn't seem like it's impossible to bow his head in front of Ronan. Since you understand, our pleasant conversation will end. But before that, at this point, Ronan paused slightly. As he paused, Nick Fury felt as if his breathing also paused. He didn't know what Ronan was going to ask for. But before that, I want to tell you one thing. Ronan tilted his head, slowly stretched out his left hand, and gently snapped his fingers. Steve Rogers watched Ronan make this move, but for some reason, he felt a palpitation. What on earth is going on? As a burst of blue light appeared, several bodies fell out of the air. These bodies were the agents killed by Ronan before. I won't take in garbage here, so please help me clean up these garbage. Maybe one day, you will thank me. Ronan blinked at Nick Fury, and then disappeared from their sight in the shocked eyes of several people. This time, the golden door was gone. But the other party still disappeared. Nick Fury looked at the bodies on the ground and couldn't help but take a deep breath. Who is the other party? Why did just investigating the other party's identity lead to such a tragedy? You know, these dead people are the elite of S.H.I.E.L.D. And the wound on his thigh. Nick Fury's face was extremely dark. He struggled to stand up from the ground and looked at the place where Ronan disappeared. He couldn't help but clenched his fists. I'm afraid this Christmas will not be a good one. Thinking of this, Nick Fury tilted his head and fell to the ground again. He only said one sentence before he fainted. Call an ambulance. Please vote for me. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 85. The second person who will have trouble sleeping. Ronan didn't care what Nick Fury was going to do next. He didn't know whether he had a happy Christmas or not. The only thing he knew was that this Christmas was probably the most unforgettable Christmas in his life. After solving the problem with the shield, Ronan's next target was naturally Tony Stark's seaside residence. It has to be said that this rich dog tycoon knows how to have fun. He actually built a super big house on this cliff.
The places below are also Tony Stark's private beaches. It's infuriating to think about it. Just for this reason, Ronan has to punish the strong and help the weak and kill Tony Stark's prestige. Ronan opened a secret door and went directly into Tony Stark's home. At this time, a man and a woman were hugging each other there. Ronan couldn't bear to see this scene. After all, he was a minor. So, Ronan once again covered his eyes with his hands. Just like that time. Rich people know how to have fun. TSK 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 TSK. Oh, don't take off your clothes. Why are you taking them off? Ahem. Ronan spoke at the right time, interrupting the obscene behavior of the man and woman in front of him. It's too indecent. How can they do such a shameful thing in public? Condemn. Ronan must condemn them severely. The sudden cough scared Tony Stark. The same was true for Pepper Potts. She was frightened by the cough and shrank directly into Tony Stark's arms, looking very terrified. The two people looked over here at the same time. When they found the familiar helmet, familiar clothes, and familiar height, Tony Stark immediately remembered the infringing fake Iron Man. It's you. Tony Stark protected Pepper behind him. He was not the purpose of Ronan's visit. He didn't even know whether the other party was an enemy or a friend. Yes, it's me. Ronan crossed his arms and leaned on the wine cabinet next to him. The two eyes on the Iron Man helmet were emitting white light, looking exactly like the real one. More importantly, Tony Stark found a blind spot. Because the helmet on the other party's face seemed to be very similar to the Mark 42 he had just developed. Did he infringe on the copyright? You came to me, not to pay me the copyright fee. Tony Stark did not panic, but just blocked Pepper Potts behind him. At the same time, the right hand hidden behind him quietly started the program. The target he set to protect was Pepper Potts. Sorry, I have never planned to spend money in vain. Let's speed up the topic. I want to go home for Christmas. Ronan seemed to inadvertently reveal a little information about himself. Sure enough, when Tony Stark heard this, his pupils couldn't help but shrink slightly. Going home for Christmas means that the other party must be a Westerner. And going home means that the other party must have a family. In that case, why don't you leave now? Go home and eat turkey with your family and thank Jesus for the coming of Jesus. Tony Stark took 2 steps in the opposite direction, and he was approaching Mark 42 who came in with Pepper Potts. One iron suit protects Pepper Potts, and the other suit is responsible for fighting. As long as he gives the order, both actions will be executed at the same time. I'm sorry, I came here today. I think Jesus will forgive me. After all, as long as your heart is sincere enough, every day can be Christmas. Ronan also looked at Tony Stark with a smile, completely ignoring his little actions. Not to mention Mark 42, even the later nano-level iron suit was also played around by Ronan, right? Ronan suddenly thought of a good idea. Since Tony Stark in that world has experienced what infinite freefall is, then Ronan can't favor one over the other. They are all Tony Stark, so let's use the same trick. So, what do you want to see me for? It can't be that something fell here. Tony Stark stood still. Although his position was still some distance away from Mark 42, if he was closer, he was afraid that the other party would be suspicious. Of course, Ronan had already guarded against this move. I heard that you have been asking about me recently, right? Then may I ask, what is your purpose? Ronan tilted his head. He was waiting for Tony Stark to complete all his plans. It was still what he said before. The purpose of his coming here was to wake up these people's dreams, break them, and then crush them into slag. If they were not conquered by the other party in their strongest state, they would probably not give up. So, Ronan was waiting for their strongest state. Let them experience what despair and helplessness are. Really? Is there such a thing? Can I say that I don't know about this? Tony Stark's expression did not change, but his heart sank suddenly. Sure enough, the visitor had bad intentions. He did not expect that the other party was so well informed. He had just asked some friends about some things about mysticism, and he actually attracted the other party. The other party's actions were really fast. Okay Tony, since you don't have any sincerity in talking to each other, I'll try another way. A way that will make you talk. Ronan said, stretching out his hands around his chest. The next second, Tony Stark suddenly waved his hand towards Pepper Potts, and a set of iron suits broke through the glass and flew from the display cabinet to Pepper Potts. Then, Tony Stark immediately stretched out his right hand, and the Mark 42 that had been assembled next to him immediately split and attached to Tony Stark's body little by little. Seeing this, Ronan couldn't help but nod. This set still has a sense of technology, but he wanted to see how long these parts could chase Tony Stark. So, when Tony Stark was ready to transform into steel, his feet suddenly felt empty. It was just like the feeling of weak legs just now. But this time, he seemed to have fallen into a bottomless black hole, falling infinitely downward. Then, a few seconds later, he fell from the ceiling again. What's more interesting is that the parts belonging to Mark 42 are also chasing Tony Stark at the same speed. Seeing this scene, Ronan gently pressed a small button next to his helmet. Click. A very classic photo. Chapter 86, Another Me. In the photo, Tony Stark's helpless and slightly aggrieved expression made Ronan burst into laughter. How to say it? From the outside, Tony Stark is undoubtedly a bohemian man. Not only does he give people a very unreliable feeling, but he also likes to be stubborn. Well, the same thing again. Thanos snapped his fingers. Why did Tony Stark survive? It's because he was too stubborn. Even the Infinity Stones felt that he couldn't erase him. Even now, he is still stubborn. Every time he appears in front of Ronan, he will spit out a word. Fuck. Then, he enters the secret door again, experiences another fall, and then appears in front of Ronan again. Squid. Although Tony Stark has been scolding him, Ronan is not angry at all, but very happy. Ronan even took a chair from the side and took out the coffee he bought before from the space ring. While drinking coffee, he watched Tony Stark's incompetent rage. Especially every time Tony Stark appears, the expression on his face changes. From the initial confusion to the later anger, and then after experiencing more than a dozen falls, his face regained its calmness, as if he was trying to find a solution. However, after there was no other way, he seemed to accept his fate. Anyway, the current situation is that Tony Stark is running in front, and the various parts of his Mark 42 are following him all the time. If Ronan mosaics the secret door in this video and sells it to the TV station, not only can he make a lot of money, but he can also contract the headlines of the next week. After all, the big news about Tony Stark is the focus of everyone's attention. Tony. At this time, Pepper Potts reacted this time. Watching Tony Stark disappear, appear, disappear, and then appear again, Pepper Potts was a little at a loss. What's going on? What happened? What should she do? Pepper, you start. Jarvis, take me. Get out. The continuous calls from Tony Stark are like intermittent signals. Just by imagining that scene, you can know how desperate he is at the moment. Pepper Potts probably understood what Tony Stark meant. She, in the Iron Man suit, raised her right hand towards Tony Stark's position. Don't use it. Palm cannon. Tony Stark, who was falling continuously, was still worried that he would be killed by a palm cannon. After all, he was not wearing the Iron Man suit now. Pepper Potts paused. She was also a smart person and understood what Tony Stark meant. So, the arm of the suit on her right hand fell off directly and crashed into Tony Stark's position. Bang. Unfortunately, however, this shot did not hit Tony Stark. Yo, it's a hollow shot outside the basket. It seems that women are not as accurate as men in shooting. Ronan took a sip of coffee and couldn't help shaking his head. This accuracy needs more practice. No, Pepper Potts only needs to practice dodging skills and let Tony Stark practice accuracy. Come again. Once. You can. Yes. Faced with Tony Stark's distant encouragement, Pepper Potts took a deep breath and raised her left hand again. If she still couldn't succeed this time, then she, bang, this time, it was still a miscalculation. Although the flying arm of the battlesuit hit Tony Stark, it only hit his shoulder. Not only did it not knock Tony Stark out, it even made Tony Stark do a 720-degree mid-air turn. With this difficulty, whether it is gymnastics or swimming, it is definitely a full score. Tony, how about this? As long as you say I'm wrong, I'll put you down. What do you think? Ronan couldn't stand it anymore. This aim was too bad. He was just like Yuki's father, Mr. Wang, who couldn't bear to see others suffer, so he decided to help Tony Stark. Well, the price was just to let Tony Stark apologize. No. Yes. Tony Stark said these words very firmly, looking like a hero who would rather die than surrender. However, considering his current situation, it seems that he is just being stubborn. Tony Stark is here. He is being stubborn. He is still being stubborn. Ronan roared from his soul, as if he saw Tony Stark's unyielding spirit. This spirit is enough to be passed down for several generations, and even immortal. Iron Man fell. However, this spirit did not last for a few minutes. Tony Stark was finally kicked in the chest by Pepper Potts, and the sofa in the living room was directly knocked off. Pepper Potts looked at all this with a blank face, and it was Jarvis who helped him do it just now. Now, she wanted to go up and take a look at Tony Stark's injuries, but she was a little afraid of Ronan who was sitting next to her. So she was in a dilemma. Tony, are you okay? Pepper Potts couldn't help but shout over there. Tony Stark covered his chest and stood up from the ground. Mark 42 also attached to his body, and he finally turned from Tony Stark into Iron Man. It's okay. But next time, I'll use less force. Ahem. 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 Obviously, Tony Stark was hit hard by that kick just now. Of course, now that he has turned into Iron Man, his confidence is overflowing. The sky is clear, the rain has stopped, and he feels that he can do it again. He stepped forward. Ronan has given him a chance, and now Tony Stark has become Iron Man as he wished. He didn't know that this was the beginning of his despair. Tell me your purpose. Otherwise, this will become your burial place. Tony Stark raised his right hand, and the energy cannon in his palm began to glow. At the same time, all the iron suits around him lit up their eyes at the same time, flew out of the display cabinets, and surrounded Ronan in the middle. It seems that the offense and defense of both sides have changed. Oh, I'm so scared. Isn't it a bit unfair that so many of you are fighting against me alone? As a dignified Iron Man, can you only bully the few with the majority? Although he said so, Ronan's performance was completely different from what he said. He even took a sip of coffee while saying this. However, Tony Stark didn't say anything at all, but just stared at Ronan closely. He was very wary of Ronan, because just that move just now almost left Tony Stark unable to fight back. And now, he didn't dare to be careless. Forget it, let's make a quick decision. After all, it's Christmas, isn't it? As he said that, Ronan stood up from the chair and then threw the empty coffee cup accurately into the trash can beside him. I hope this Christmas, you have a good time. Chapter 87. What is a real Iron Man? Zzzz. Zzzz. The cheap sound effect that would wake Tony Stark up in the middle of the night sounded again. Especially the sound effect that was exactly the same as Jarvis's, which made Tony Stark doubt for a while whether he had really leaked Jarvis's voice code. After the 50-cent sound effect ended, red energy whips were wrapped around Ronan's forearms. The black cloak extended from Ronan's neck to his back and fell to the base of his thighs. The color on the helmet also turned red. Fuck. Tony Stark cursed inwardly and immediately issued orders to all the robots. Attack. However, his speed was still slow. Ronan's figure had already disappeared from the spot. Jarvis, search for the enemy's position. Tony Stark immediately became alert. He didn't think that the other party would leave inexplicably. Mr. Stark, the enemy is here. The next second, Tony Stark only heard a heavy blow from the back of his head, and then the whole person flew forward. Jarvis didn't even finish the word behind. Bang, crash, boom, creak, boom. All kinds of strange sounds rang out, and when Tony Stark flew up from the ground, he saw a picture that he could not forget. The Iron Man suits that were standing there just now were now broken into pieces. They were piled up in the same place, from standing robots to the current garbage dump. What the hell is this speed? However, the next second, before Tony Stark could react, he was punched in the face. Oh no, it should be the helmet. He only felt a flash in front of his eyes, and the whole system began to go wrong. Fuck. This is the second time Tony Stark has cursed today. The opponent's punch actually caused damage to the Iron Man suit so easily. So what if there are more punches? I'm afraid that these special materials made of the exterior can't withstand the opponent's punch, right? Not bad, not bad. Your Iron Man suit is still very strong. At this time, Ronan spoke again. Following the voice, Tony Stark saw something that made him even more speechless. On Ronan's left and right arms, he was wearing an Iron Man suit. The left one was red, and the right one was gold. Both were classic colors of the Iron Man suit. What made Tony Stark even more unacceptable was that on Ronan's chest, he actually drew a crooked triangle logo. Although the logo was not very similar, Tony Stark could see it. The other party even wanted to imitate the arc reactor on his chest. Do you have this material? I also want to make some, and make a cooler glove. Ronan moved his fingers, and felt that this material was very light. But at the same time, it was also very strong. He would wear the Infinity Gauntlet on his left hand in the future. If his right hand was empty, it would definitely attract other people's attention. It would be better to make a fake Infinity Gauntlet, and put it on his right hand. One on the left, and one on the right. It looked symmetrical. Why didn't you say that you wanted vibranium? Tony Stark rolled his eyes. He finally knew someone who was even less reliable than him. We are clearly fighting. Why are you saying these things? Although I know you are strong, you are humiliating me, don't you know? Humiliation. Bang. As soon as Tony Stark finished speaking, he was hit hard on the other side of his face again. He flew backwards again. Vibranium. Vibranium is also fine. I'm a very contented person. I don't dislike vibranium. Ronan returned to his original position and seemed very satisfied with Tony Stark's answer. However, Tony Stark didn't think so. He flew up from the ground again, and the palm cannons in his hands began to condense. But there was a sharp sound, and two blue rays of light directly hit Ronan's face. Tony Stark wanted to know what the person in front of him looked like. Oh my god, you are really willing to do it. This is your home. Ronan complained, and a golden halo appeared in front of him again, instantly absorbing the two energy cannons. Boom. The next second, there was a roar outside the window, and the whole house felt a vibration. Tony Stark looked at Ronan in disbelief, because he knew what had just happened from Jarvis' report. I've said it before, as long as you say I was wrong, I'll forgive you. Now, the cliff below your house was accidentally hit by your palm cannon. If this continues, I'm afraid you'll have to rebuild this house. Ronan sighed, his tone quite serious. From what he said, he was not the bad guy who broke into someone else's house without permission, and Tony Stark was more like the bad kid who knew his mistakes, but didn't change them. This was something Tony Stark couldn't imagine. How could there be such a thick-skinned person in the world? If Ronan knew what Tony Stark was thinking now, he would only say one sentence. Yes, right in front of me. What exactly do you want to do? From the beginning to now, you don't seem to have any intention of fighting me seriously. What is your purpose? Tony Stark took a deep breath. Although he didn't want to believe it, all this was true, because there were several times when the other party didn't give him any chance, including when he kept falling before, and the two palm cannons just now. No matter how he thought about it, Tony Stark had only one answer in his heart. The other party was simply playing a trick on him. Although he still didn't want to admit it. Actually, I told you my purpose from the beginning. You want to explore my secrets, so I have to show up and give you a little warning. Of course, before you, there was another boiled egg who was also warned by me. But the price they paid was much more severe than yours. Ronan clapped his hands lightly, and a ring of Ragada appeared in his palm, splitting the Mark 42 that Tony Stark had just developed in half. This warning was enough for him, right? Boiled egg. When Tony Stark heard this name, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. But soon, Jarvis analyzed the meaning of boiled egg. A kind of oriental delicacy. It is made by using a special cooking method for eggs. The appearance is black. You actually have discrimination? Tony Stark almost blurted out. However, Ronan couldn't help but roll his eyes. When did he discriminate against others? Is this vivid metaphor no longer effective? You can think whatever you like. But before that, I will give you a warning. After saying that, the ring of Ragador in Ronan's hands began to extend outward with jagged teeth. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. Please vote for me. Chapter 88. The battle was forced to be interrupted. You are northeast 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 sunshine rainbow little white horse. A pleasant ringtone sounded, and Tony Stark, who was standing opposite, widened his eyes. Although he didn't understand the other lyrics at all, there was one word that he heard very clearly. Northeast northeast. Northeast northeast. You still say you don't have racial discrimination? Tony Stark's face was full of disbelief. In this society, how can someone dare to make such remarks publicly? Aren't you afraid of being beaten to death? Oh, no one can beat him, then it's okay. Excuse me, answer the phone. Ronan raised his hand in a muffled voice and took out a mobile phone from his pocket. This is the latest model of mobile phone, although it is not even a small amount of money for Tony Stark. However, people who can easily afford such a mobile phone are probably not from ordinary middle-class families. Of course, this is not the most surprising thing for Tony Stark. What surprised him the most was that a wizard like this actually relied on a mobile phone to communicate. Shouldn't it be that kind of? Tony Stark didn't know how to describe it. Anyway, he shouldn't use a mobile phone. Hello, hello. Ronan answered the phone. Yeah, oh. Then what? Ha 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 ha. In Tony Stark's eyes, Ronan at this moment looked like a person with a little problem in his brain. Because his way of answering the phone was really a bit too alternative. Is this human language? I'm having a little communication with a boy with advanced anxiety, egomania, and a hard mouth. I'll be there soon. Listening to what Ronan said, Tony Stark even opened his helmet and revealed his face. Were you talking about me with those words just now? He watched Ronan hang up the phone with his eyes full of inquiries. Are you sure that those words you just said were about me? Looks like I have to leave now. Ronan sighed with regret and put his phone in his pocket. The show was at its most critical and happiest moment. Who would have thought that one would call him? According to him, when he was having dinner with someone else, there was a huge explosion outside. The explosion directly affected their restaurant. Now, many of them are trapped in the restaurant, and the door has completely collapsed. In the near future, I'm afraid this restaurant will also be at risk of collapse. Although Wang has the ability to escape, according to the rules of Kamatage, he is not allowed to show Kamatage's spells in front of outsiders. So, in desperation, he could only call Ronan. After all, Ronan has already shown it once in front of the public, and it shouldn't be a big deal to do it again. Right? What are you doing? Tony Stark was about to ask what he was taking you to, but by coincidence, the phone in his pocket also rang. He glanced at Ronan, swallowed the words he wanted to ask, and picked up the phone. Hello. It's me, Tony Stark. What did you say? Tony Stark's face changed immediately after he said 3 sentences. Because he heard a very shocking news. His bodyguard and driver, Happy, was actually affected by an explosion and is now in critical condition. Although Tony Stark usually dislikes Happy, the two of them actually have a very good relationship. It can even be said that Happy is the only person he can trust besides Pepper Potts. After hanging up the phone, Tony Stark also looked at Ronan. Oh, it seems that you have also encountered problems. Ronan raised his eyebrows, and he saw all kinds of emotions on Tony Stark's face. Anger, uneasiness, anxiety, and a trace of eagerness to calm down. In that case, let's stop today. I hope you won't pursue things you can't understand next time. Otherwise, next time, it won't be as simple as falling. Ronan waved at Tony Stark, and a secret door appeared in front of him. On the other side of the door, a very dilapidated street appeared. Many places were burning with raging fires, and Tony Stark could even clearly smell the unique smell after the explosion. That place was. Tony Stark was stunned, as if the place where Happy was affected by the explosion was also there. Wait. He was about to speak out to stop Ronan, and wanted to hitchhike. However, Ronan had already crossed the portal and even made a goodbye gesture to him. The next second, the portal closed. At the moment the portal closed, Ronan only heard a fuck. Ronan curled his lips. Come with Tony Stark. That's him. From his appearance, it can be seen that Tony Stark must have received a call about the explosion, and he is afraid that some relatives and friends have been affected by the explosion. At this time, Ronan can probably guess this situation. It's nothing more than Happy, because Killian and Pepper Potts are too close. so he is worried about something going wrong. He casually took a picture of Killian's license plate number and secretly followed one of them. Finally, the deal between two of them was interrupted in a small square. Then a man who was high exploded instantly, and finally everyone was swept by the sudden explosion. Unfortunately, Wang was one of them. This one. Found it. Ronan looked at the surrounding restaurants, and finally found the restaurant where Wang was. So he opened a portal again, and stepped directly into the restaurant. At this time, the people in the restaurant were in panic. Some were crying, some were shouting, and some were scared, and squatting on the ground trembling. There were even two men fighting. Ronan punched these two people one by one, and solved them directly. And his sudden and violent appearance instantly made the whole place quiet. If you want to live, go through the door behind me. Of course, those who don't believe in me can stay here. I won't force you. Ronan tilted his head towards the secret door behind him. Everyone in the room looked at each other, not knowing how to choose. At this time, Wang, who asked Ronan for help, stood up first. I believe you. After saying that, Wang took the hand of a woman next to him, and walked behind Ronan. Ronan nodded with great satisfaction. At least in terms of being a stooge, Wang is still very good. But, that woman, seems a little familiar. Soon, Wang's cheers came from outside. Ronan rolled his eyes. This guy's really too dramatic. Seeing that the two people walked out safely and even cheered, they no longer hesitated and rushed towards the secret door. At this time, the two men who had just fought were still lying on the ground. As for the two of you, you recognize this set of equipment on me, right? So there is no need to say who I am. If you want to sue me, you are always welcome. Asking for a monthly ticket. Chapter 89. I'm Tony Stark's trumpet. Ronan left the two men away to get rich. If nothing unexpected happens, all the people who escaped together can become their witnesses. Ronan walked out of the portal, only after everyone left the dangerous floor. As soon as he came out, he saw Chang Wen. Oh no, a man in a red tights, swinging on his head. Anyway, all the people who could be saved were saved by him. No need to think, this person is Peter Parker. Unfortunately, when he was swinging on the swings, he also found the portal with his sharp eyes. Especially Ronan in front of the portal, he was also seen by him. Although the portal disappeared in an instant, Peter Parker saw it clearly. It's over. Looking at Peter Parker flying over here, Ronan couldn't help but tremble in his heart. Why don't you be a hero in your Queens? Why do you come here to save people? Moreover, your speed is fast enough. How long after the explosion? How did you get here? Peter Parker landed lightly in front of Ronan and seemed very curious about Ronan's dress. He had seen that door and this iron battle suit. However, when the two were combined, he felt that something was wrong. Ronan? Peter Parker asked tentatively. However, Ronan coughed and put his hands behind his back. Oh, Spider-Man? I've heard of your name. Although it's not as famous as my Iron Man, you are also a superhero. I, Tony Stark, feel relieved that you can come to save people. Fortunately, Ronan's helmet has a voice changer, otherwise Peter Parker might really hear it. As for Peter Parker's initial shouting of his name, Ronan pretended that he didn't hear anything. Are you Mr. Stark? But your voice, and that door. Peter Parker looked at Ronan doubtfully. Although he couldn't believe that the other party was Tony Stark, the armor on his body was too representative. In this world, apart from Tony Stark, there is only one set of iron suits, Patriot. Therefore, Peter Parker couldn't help but believe it. Yes, I'm the famous Tony Stark. Although I'm stubborn, have advanced anxiety, and I'm also an egomaniac. But I'm indeed Tony Stark. Ronan nodded and admitted his identity. Anyway, he had already admitted it once in the restaurant just now, so what if he admitted it again? He really wanted face. But only a little bit was enough. Is that circle your latest technology? Space technology? Did it develop from the aliens before? Wow, this technology is so cool, I really can't believe it. If I didn't see it with my own eyes. Boom. Just as Peter Parker turned into a chatterbox, a roar came from the sky. The two looked up at the same time, only to see a very beautiful arc across the horizon. The classic red and gold color combination. Under the light, the armor also reflected a little light. Peter Parker glanced at the sky and then looked at Ronan opposite. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Ahem. Yes, this is the armor I summoned for rescue. It's all controlled by artificial intelligence. I came in a hurry, so I wore simple equipment. Ronan pulled the corner of his mouth, although the armor parts on his body were also iron armor. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a voice came from the armor that fell from the sky to the square. Where's the ambulance? Come quickly, he still has a heartbeat. Tony Stark's clear voice instantly spread throughout the square. The paramedics next to him also rushed over and surrounded Tony Stark. The atmosphere seemed to be awkward again. Peter Parker pointed to the artificial intelligence in the square, but his eyes were looking at Ronan. The meaning was very clear. Is that artificial intelligence? Ronan took a deep breath, and he had only one thought now. Regret. Very regretful. He should have knocked Tony Stark down at the beginning. No, I'm an artificial intelligence, responsible for helping Mr. Stark solve his problems. Now my mission is complete, so I have to leave first. Goodbye. After saying that, Ronan rushed to the edge of the rooftop in 3 or 2 steps, and then jumped down with his legs. Seeing this, Peter Parker hurriedly chased after him. However, when he looked down at the rooftop, he had already lost his figure. At this time, the entire square was surrounded by police cars, and a large number of fully armed police officers bravely rushed towards the square. How to say it? The American police always arrive at the last moment. It's very reasonable. After the police arrived, reporters also rushed to the scene, and the helicopter of the TV station also came to the sky. How to say this scene? The explosion just now was like a banquet. After all the appetizers were served, everyone sat down and started the meal. As for the ending of the chefs and helpers in front, it was not the focus of discussion for these guests. What they wanted to discuss was how much these dinners cost, and then criticize the host of the banquet. Well, this is very American. Peter Parker glanced at the surging police, and the thought of going down to check it out was extinguished immediately. After all, he was just a volunteer policeman, and he had a lot of black fans. In addition, he didn't have a huge background like Tony Stark to show his face, so he could only slip away. However, this incident made him more certain of a belief. What Ronan said that day was definitely a lie to him. Just after Peter Parker quickly left the scene, Tony Stark in the center of the square also stood up. Happy had been taken away by an ambulance. After all, Happy was also Tony Stark's personal bodyguard. Don't look at the monk's face, look at the Buddha's face. There is also a priority order for saving people. Just before being surrounded by reporters, Tony Stark also got feedback from Jarvis. Only 2 of the cameras in the entire square were barely working, but none of them captured the scene of the explosion at that time. However, one of the cameras captured a scene that Tony Stark was very interested in. A person wearing an iron battlesuit on his arms, legs and face, and another person wearing a red tights seemed to be confronting each other. Tony Stark knew the former, and the latter, according to Jarvis' report, was a well-known volunteer policeman in Queens. Spider-Man. It seemed that the 2 were talking about something. However, both of them were wearing masks, and it was impossible to judge by lip reading. In the end, the former, the one Tony Stark paid the most attention to, jumped off the rooftop directly, and the camera did not capture the corresponding scene. The next moment, Spider-Man, who has become famous recently, also left the rooftop. What other intersections are there between the 2 of them? Please vote for the monthly ticket. Chapter 90. It's broken, I'm a substitute. Half an hour later, in the villa, Ronan waited for Wong and his date. There was no doubt that Wong's date Ronan knew, and was very familiar with him, because the other party was also one of the mages of Kamataj. Sarah Wolf. Wow, I didn't expect the 2 of you to get together. Should it be said that loneliness makes people sad? Ronan looked at the couple in front of him, his face full of strange expressions. Not to mention the difference in their body shapes, one was tall and strong, and the other looked very thin. It was that they kept the secret very strictly. If they hadn't been trapped in the restaurant today, Ronan really didn't know that the 2 of them were already in love. It should even be said that most of the mages of Kamataj probably didn't know. You have to keep it secret. We don't plan to announce it to the public yet. Wang sighed. If there was no other way, he didn't want to ask Ronan for help. Because once Ronan knew about this, he would most likely use this matter to threaten him and make him pay a price. For example, in that case, I won't be polite. I'm usually a talkative person, so if there's something that can fill my mouth, maybe this secret can stay in my heart. Ronan crossed his legs, his eyes narrowed like a little fox. How could he not accept this benefit that was delivered to his door? If he didn't accept it, he could change his name. What do you want? Wang's face darkened. He knew there would be such a result. However, in order to keep his secret love secret from others, he could only let Ronan slaughter his wallet. Hearing Wang say this, Ronan's eyes lit up. He put his arm around Wang's shoulders, looking like a good brother. With the good brotherhood between us for many years, I'm embarrassed to slaughter you. I remember there's a pretty good buffet restaurant in New York, right? A place that specializes in lobsters. It seems to be called Crab House. Ronan touched his chin, as if he casually mentioned such a place. Hearing that Ronan was going to a buffet restaurant, Wang first breathed a sigh of relief. How should I put it? As a famous glutton in Kamatage, Ronan's appetite is no joke. Although he looks very thin, Ronan is actually a big eater. If he goes to those restaurants that order dishes, I'm afraid Wang will really bleed a lot. However, when he heard Ronan say the name of the buffet, he jumped up from the sofa. Are you kidding me? That restaurant is known as the most expensive buffet restaurant in New York. Wang widened his eyes, and the light in his eyes that wanted to kill Ronan was clearly visible. Wang had heard of that restaurant. It is said that a buffet costs $115 and if taxes and tips are included, it will almost be $150. For 2 people to eat, it will cost $300. For Wang, it would be better to kill him than to let him spend $300 on a meal. After all, the money in his pocket is not that much. Then I have no choice. If there weren't so many lobsters blocking my mouth, maybe I would accidentally let out this secret while talking in my sleep during training one day. Ronan leaned on the sofa, his hands on the back of the sofa, his eyes looking at the ceiling, and whistled. Threat. Naked threat. What do you mean by talking in your sleep during training? Why don't you just tell others if I don't treat you to a meal? Shara Wolf looked at the 2 people with a smile on his face. How should I put it? When she first met Ronan, Ronan was still a kid who had just started school. The 2 of them have known each other for almost 10 years. Shara Wolf was also very clear about Ronan's temper. Although Wang was her boyfriend, Ronan was considered a junior brother in Kamatage. In addition, Wang and Ronan had always had a good relationship, so Shara Wolf could conclude that Ronan was asking for an exorbitant price. No, it's too expensive. You can choose anything for $20. No more. Wang gritted his teeth and gave a price. It would be better to kill him than to pay $150. Although Ronan didn't know why the 2 of them had to hide their relationship, it had nothing to do with him. Then it's $100. I can accept cash or checks. Ronan crossed his legs and lowered his price. Bargaining still requires some sincerity. No. At most $30. If it's more, just tell me. Wang raised his head, looking quite tragic. However, didn't Ronan know him yet? This was far from Wang's bottom line. How about this? We don't have to test each other. The bottom price is $50. Of course I can consider a discount. After all, if you go out to eat, a restaurant that charges $50, plus taxes and tips, it will probably be $60 or even more. So, you can consider transferring or cash. Ronan stretched out his right hand. The meaning is simple. You can pay. Wang glared at Ronan fiercely and then looked at Shara Wolf. Shara Wolf spread her hands, indicating that she had no choice. Finally, Wang had to take out a $20 bill and 3 old $10 bills from his suit pocket with difficulty, and then slapped them heavily in Ronan's hand. You better spend sparingly. Wang gritted his teeth when he said this. Just like the tone and expression when Ronan was cheated of the Royal Burgesset. Ronan raised his eyebrows, took Wang's wrist with his left hand, and took his hand away with force. Thank you for the gift, big brother. I will definitely plan how to spend this money. After saying this, Ronan even flattened the money one by one and put it in his pocket. After doing all this, Ronan looked at the 2 people with curiosity. Why aren't you leaving yet? Such a beautiful day. Do you want to live in a child's house? I tell you, I'm a minor. Ronan looked at the two people. He couldn't bear to see or hear some things. Wang couldn't help but roll his eyes. Damn, you want to drive people away after getting the money, right? Calling you a little fox is really overestimating you. You should be called an ungrateful wolf. At this moment, a message came from the TV that had been playing the news channel. The latest news from the TV station. We found several people who escaped from the explosion site. They were trapped in the restaurant at the time and their lives were in danger at any time. Just then, a man in an Iron Man suit appeared and saved them, and brought them out of the restaurant through a very magical portal. This person here is. However, before the host finished the introduction, the man in a suit and leather shoes next to him rushed over and grabbed the microphone. Mr. Fantastic. He is the Mr. Fantastic who saved us. He is so incredible, just like the magician in the movie. Seeing this man's extremely excited look, Ronan was stunned. Mr. Fantastic? Damn. I'm a stand-in. A preview. It will be available on the shelves at midnight on the 9th, and the manuscripts are in place, waiting for everyone to subscribe. Chapter 91 Nick Fury's Plan. Others may not know, but Ronan knows it very well. The title of Mr. Fantastic is actually the nickname of Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four. Similarly, he is also the leader of the Fantastic Four. However, in Ronan's world, he has confirmed many times that there are no mutants in this world. Even the famous Fantastic Four have never appeared. In order to confirm this news, Ronan used a little trick to hack into the American database and compared photos and names to find some clues. But except for a forensic doctor, who looks more like him, there is no other candidate who matches him. Ronan also observed the forensic doctor who looks like him for a while, but the other party is just a forensic doctor. Even last year, the forensic doctor died because of something. In other words, in this way, Ronan can be sure that there are no mutants in this world. At least not now. But, using other people's nicknames always feels a bit weird. TSK, maybe no one would have thought that Mr. Fantastic in their eyes would actually bargain for $50. Ronan didn't expect that Wang didn't know where he learned to be sarcastic. He didn't know which person who was so handsome, dignified, elegant, and graceful taught him. At this level, he must be at the platinum level. It seems that a master really produces a good student. Yeah, maybe Mr. Fantastic didn't expect that. In order to protect his lover, some people are not even willing to take out a mere $50. Is this the legendary true love? Ronan curled his lips. In terms of being sarcastic, Wang hasn't learned it yet. Wang's face froze, and he couldn't help but glance at Sarah Wolf next to him. It was obviously a secret to protect the relationship, but how did Ronan say it became protecting a lover? Although it sounds right, the meaning is far from it. After Ronan said this, Wang seemed to have become a scumbag who was not willing to pay even $50 for his lover. Sarah Wolf next to him pursed her lips. Obviously she was trying to hold back a laugh. This is a war between men. Also, Mr. Fantastic may know some little secrets of certain people. Originally, Mr. Fantastic was going to keep the secret for him, but now that Mr. Fantastic is unhappy, he is not going to keep the secret for him. Unless another $50 can fall from the sky now. Ronan crossed his legs and looked at the ceiling again. Just like when he first blackmailed Wang, it seemed that he was really waiting for $$ to fall from the sky. Upon hearing this, Wang's face changed drastically, and he immediately covered Ronan's mouth, but Ronan dodged it flexibly. It's useless to cover your mouth with your hand, unless there is $50. Ronan winked at Wang, and stretched out his right hand again. His meaning was very clear. Hush money, plus mental damage compensation for your sarcastic remarks to me just now. It's not much, just $50. Okay, I'll give you $50. As he said that, Wang hurriedly began to take money out of his pocket. However, his movement seemed to be a little slow. Sarah Wolf took out a few bills from her pocket and put them in Ronan's palm. I'll give you $100 if you tell me this secret. Sarah Wolf looked at Ronan with a smile. Ronan's face lit up, and he put the $100 directly into his pocket. Seeing Ronan's action, Wang was desperate. No, Wang was still making his last struggle. However, it was too late. 17 days ago, at 5:48 in the morning, someone sneaked out of the room and walked into the laundry room. He was holding a pair of underwear in his hand. After saying this, Ronan went straight into the secret door and disappeared in front of the two people. Wang's face was a 10. Before leaving, Ronan blinked at Wang again. Don't say that I didn't create an opportunity for you. Being a brother has helped you a lot. When hearing this secret, Sarah Wolf was stunned at first, but soon thought of something. The night before should be the night when the two people confirmed their relationship. But the two did not live together that night. The next morning, Wang sneaked out with his underwear. Doesn't that prove that? Thinking of this, Sarah Wolf chuckled and looked at Wang with seductive eyes. It must be another incredible night. Ronan, who was very brotherly, returned to his small apartment building. Anyway, the two of them should know that, even if they were passionate, they would not be passionate in the villa. Ronan just didn't want to be a light bulb. At this time, he had come to another country because he had a special express in his hand to be delivered to others. It was a good Christmas. In addition to those who were unable to sleep due to the explosion, there were also several people who couldn't sleep. Nick Fury sat in a safe house, staring at a picture with a gloomy face. In the picture, it was Ronan wearing an Iron Man helmet during the New York War. As Ronan said, the surveillance video did not capture any images of Ronan because Nick Fury couldn't install surveillance in his office. This is his office. Steve Rogers was sitting with him. As for Black Widow and Hawkeye, the two were receiving treatment. Captain, you have fought him head on. How strong is he? Nick Fury turned his eyes away from Ronan's photo and looked at Steve Rogers. He wanted to know what his strongest soldier thought of this man. However, Steve Rogers shook his head. Maybe I can fight him for a while, but I'm definitely not his opponent. After all, when he fought me, he didn't use those mysterious methods. Especially, Steve Rogers didn't continue talking here because he didn't need to say it at all. Nick Fury could also think of the fate of his agents. The bodies of those agents have been sent for examination, but the test reports have not come out yet. But without exception, all of them are dead. So, we have no way to deal with him, right? Nick Fury took a deep breath, his eyes full of unwillingness. The last time he encountered such a situation was during the Battle of New York. That time was also the most desperate time for Nick Fury, because once they failed, the whole earth would be over. You should have the video of that fight too. If he uses that move on us, the one he called Death Lotus, how do we deal with it? Steve Rogers was very calm, because in his heart, he never believed that Nick Fury was right. According to Ronan, it was Nick Fury who investigated the other party's identity first, so Ronan fought back. He understood Ronan's thoughts. However, after all, Ronan killed people from SHIELD. Steve Rogers could only classify Ronan as a criminal. What if we use that weapon? Available at 0-100 hours on November 9. Please support. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 92. Is this just a warning? The weapons Nick Fury was talking about were undoubtedly the weapons made by the Cosmic Cube. These weapons were still stored in the safe of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now that they lost the Cosmic Cube, these weapons became a one-off. But there were only so many left. I'm afraid not. After all, that kind of weapon might not be able to hit him at all. Steve Rogers shook his head. He had fought with Ronan and knew how fast Ronan was. If that kind of weapon could hit him, it would be fine. But if it couldn't hit him, it would be no different from scrap metal. Hearing this answer, Nick Fury also fell silent. What Steve Rogers said made sense. No matter how powerful the weapon was, if it couldn't hit him, it would be useless. Nick Fury still remembered Ronan's unpredictable speed, because he saw it with his own eyes. Ronan took less than a second to get from behind him to the sofa. This speed is not something that humans can achieve, and even if they can achieve it, it is impossible to not even see a shadow. Why not ask Tony? Obviously he is the expert in weapons, right? Steve Rogers proposed a new idea. There is no doubt that Tony Stark is the smartest among them. Even in the entire human race, there are few people smarter than him. so looking for him might bring some unexpected gains. However, Nick Fury did not express any opinion on this, because in his opinion, Tony Stark is just a dissolute playboy after all. Even if he becomes a superhero, he is far from being able to follow orders like Steve Rogers. More importantly, even if he goes to find him, will Tony Stark help him? This is not certain. At this moment, the door of the conference room was opened. Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Alexander Pierce walked in from outside. "Are you okay, Nick? I rushed here as soon as I received the news." Alexander Pierce walked quickly to Nick Fury's side and asked carefully, "It's okay, but I can't stand up and hug you." Nick Fury smiled and pointed to his thigh covered with bandages. Fortunately, the shot was a penetrating wound and did not injure the aorta, otherwise Nick Fury's leg would be completely useless with so much blood loss. "I'm glad you're okay. I heard about this on the way. I will recommend to the council to search for information about him worldwide." Alexander Pierce patted Nick Fury's shoulder like a gentle mentor. I'm afraid Nick Fury at this time could not have imagined that under this gentle appearance, there was a venomous snake that would bite anyone. Hearing this, Nick Fury shook his head. Let's not provoke him for the time being, and don't investigate his identity anymore. At least not now. Nick Fury took a deep breath. Although he was very conceited, he understood one thing. It is not a rational choice to rashly disturb the opponent when you don't have the ability to solve the opponent. Nick Fury before also suffered this kind of loss, so he ended up like this. "Okay, now you are the director of SHIELD. I will listen to you." Alexander Pierce nodded and gave Nick Fury enough respect. However, in secret, Hydra has begun to act quietly. "Alexander, I need you to do me a favor." Nick Fury took a deep breath, as if he had made a decision. "You said, as long as I can do it." Alexander Pierce was not vague at all. "Regarding the proposal, I have already signed it, and it is in the safe. Please help me follow up in the early stages of the plan. After all, I don't have the ability now." The proposal Nick Fury mentioned was the insight plan mentioned earlier. If he was still hesitant before, after experiencing this incident, he was obviously determined. Even if he couldn't deal with that person, he had to nip other crises in the bud. "Okay, I promise you. I'll do it now. You continue." Alexander Pierce stood up, patted Nick Fury's shoulder again, and turned to leave the meeting room in Nick Fury's touching eyes. Not only did he leave space for Nick Fury and others, but he also helped Nick Fury. A mentor like this is simply perfect. After Alexander Pierce left and waited for a few seconds, Nick Fury spoke. "How are your injuries?" He looked at Black Widow and Hawkeye. Black Widow shrugged and said, "It's nothing serious, at least he didn't kill me." For Black Widow, as long as she didn't die, it wasn't a big injury. Compared to the bodies left on the ground, she was lucky enough. "I'm fine, I slept well." Hawkeye, who had his right arm hanging, told a joke. Of course, Nick Fury knew that their injuries didn't look as easy as they said. Black Widow suffered a serious back injury. Although with her physical fitness, she had no problem walking around. But if she wanted to fight, she wouldn't have to think about it for at least a month. As for Hawkeye, after a few rounds of fighting with his opponent, the opponent actually broke his right hand. This didn't count other minor injuries. In other words, in less than 10 minutes, the opponent forced Nick Fury's two generals to take at least a month off. Even Steve Rogers, who was the best fighter, had a lot of bruises on his body. It can be said that, if the opponent kills them, they will definitely be wiped out. It seems that he is right. This is indeed a warning. Nick Fury took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. At this moment, Ronan's terrifying back seemed to appear in front of him again. Not only did he not lose to 3 people, but he also easily defeated his 3 generals. Even if he wanted, he could kill him quietly before anyone came. Thinking of this, Nick Fury suddenly felt a little chilly. How many people like this are there? If there is only one, it's okay, but what if there are 10, 100, or 1,000? Nick Fury didn't dare to think about it any further. Beep, beep. At this moment, a cell phone alert sound interrupted the quiet conference room. Nick Fury took out the phone in his pocket and pressed the answer button. A projection appeared in the center of the conference room. The person who called was Tony Stark, whom they mentioned before. "Oh, let me see how low your morale is." If I'm guessing correctly, that Mr. Fantastic has probably already come to find you, Nick. Luo Nan. Available at 0 hours on November 9. Please support. Chapter 93 Remarks on the release. Remarks on the bookshelf. First of all, I have a good news for you. This book will be available for VIP at 0 hours on the 9th. In fact, when I typed the words remarks on the bookshelf, I don't know why, I always felt a surge of emotion. To be honest, I was really excited. This book is the first book I wrote on Gideon that was put on the shelves, and the results were beyond my expectations. To be honest, I couldn't even believe it. In the trial promotion of the new book, our book gained nearly 8,000 collections in a week, with an average of more than 1,000 collections per day. Then it advanced to the second round, the third round, the fourth round. Zia Oliver, Sanjiang strong recommendation. I even got an honor that many books have never had, and I was on the left cover of the homepage. My editor Yai told me that the only books that can be recommended in this way are great writers and platinum authors, or very popular books. This really made me unbelievable. But at the same time as being surprised, the word thank you appeared in my heart again. I'm not thanking anyone else, but everyone who is reading the book now. It is you who have sent this book to its current position with your evaluation tickets, monthly tickets, rewards, and follow-up reading. The new book list went from more than 70 to more than 50, and then more than 30. Finally, the highest ranking came to the 4th place in the new book list and the 2nd place in the light novel category. Then, in the few days after it was removed from the list, it stabilized at the 8th place. Even a few hours before it was removed from the list, we rushed to the 6th place. All of these were built up bit by everyone. It is because of you that this book has achieved such a brilliant result today. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid this book would be drowned in the vast sea of books, and I don't know when it will be put on the shelves and finished. To tell you the truth, as the first book of a newcomer, my initial expectation was to have 500 subscriptions, and I would be satisfied. But now, because of your support, I have a bigger ambition. I want to hit 1,000 subscriptions. 2,000 subscriptions. Excellent. Even if possible, I want to hit the legendary 10,000 subscriptions. Although I know that such a statement gives people the feeling that it is indeed a bit too crazy. However, people are not arrogant when they are young, right? I want to borrow your hands to help me realize this seemingly unattainable wish. I want to know how high a new author can reach. So, here, I would like to ask you to give me a subscription. Even a first order. If you think this book is good, you can subscribe to support it. If you think this book is average, at least give it a first order for the hard work of typing. I don't ask for much, that's all. As for some readers who choose to read pirated copies, I also have something to say. Because I know that everyone's family background and financial resources are different, and they all have unspeakable secrets. So, I won't say much. But I just ask everyone to recharge 1 yuan, click on the first order, and help this book's performance to a high level. Next, let's talk about the rules for adding more. Because the collection of this book is about 30,000, I set the first order at 1,000. After all, a subscription ratio of 30:1 is barely qualified. When it is put on the shelves at 0 hours, let's first update 10,000 words, just to explore the way for subscription. Then there are the rules for adding more. Let's talk about the monthly tickets first. 500 monthly tickets plus 1 more chapter. This is what I asked some authors for, and they gave me some advice. One of my author friends owes 100 chapters a month. If we can get to this point, I can also update so much. Then there is the leader. The leader will add 5 chapters, as long as there is, I will add. The Silver Alliance will add 50 chapters. As for the Gold Alliance, I will have a dream tonight, in the dream, ha. After talking about the rules for adding chapters, let's say a little thanks. First of all, my editor Yai. To be honest, I'm really very grateful to him. If it weren't for him, maybe this book would still be gathering dust in some corner. So, if there are friends who want to start a book, you can submit it to him. He is open 7x 24 hours a day all year round, and he will review the manuscript even on Saturdays and Sundays. He is a good and conscientious editor. Then, according to convention, a few books must be sacrificed for listing. Hehe. Rebuilding the prosperous Tang dynasty starts with summoning players. Although this book looks like it was written by a new author, it is actually written by an experienced author. Moreover, this book has been written to 1.25 million words and has received the boutique badge. I have also witnessed it with my own eyes. If you like historical literature, you can go and have a look. I'm really the school grass of the Military Art Academy. You Are Not Allowed to Laugh is also a new book by an old author. I remember his book Chasing the Dream of Dayan from the car accident in Fen Bay, which I also read. If you are interested, you can have a look. Zhang Wu, Starting from the Simulator is also a new book by a big guy, but it uses a new vest. I won't say what the old vest is, but the quality is absolutely guaranteed. You can go and have a look. Finally, there is another book Fu Chiangun. As for the quality, the 4th place in the new book monthly ticket list can already explain the problem, so I don't need to say more. Anyway, I have been chasing it, and I have chased it to the latest chapter. The above are the books I sacrificed, including new books, old books, and books on the list. Anyway, I have already absorbed the luck. Finally, I have to say that everyone should support me first and then read their books. Chapter 94. To deal with him, we must unite. Please order first. Boiled egg. Although Nick Fury didn't quite understand this difficult term, he knew it was definitely not a good word. You called to laugh at us, didn't you? Besides, is your bodyguard's injury really okay? Nick Fury was naturally unwilling to be outdone, and he didn't intend to show any mercy to Tony Stark. Anyway, they were hurting each other. This wave is called tearing the wound. Perhaps at this moment, Tony Stark thought of a very classic famous saying in his mind. If I don't have a sword in my hand, I can't protect you. If I keep holding the sword, I can't hold you tightly. TSK TSK TSK. Fuck you, Nick Fury. Happy has passed the most dangerous time and is no longer in danger of life. It's some people. I heard that the heavily guarded shield building was almost wiped out, and I don't know who almost shot his leg. Tony Stark was not to be outdone and tore Nick Fury's wound again. Nick Fury's eyes widened and he looked at the 3 people sitting around him. The meaning was obvious. Who spread the news? However, the 3 people shook their heads at the same time. Nick, you know me. I'm not the kind of person who talks nonsense. Steve Rogers denied. Director, you know me too. I've been staying in the medical room to treat my arm. Hawkeye pointed to his left arm. He didn't have time to commit the crime. The remaining Black Widow shrugged. If I get close to Tony Stark now, I'm afraid Pepper will find out the first time. The 3 of them perfectly showed their alibi. As the eldest brother, Nick Fury was a little speechless for a while. This matter is a great shame for Nick Fury. According to the Security Council, they all doubted whether Nick Fury was capable of continuing to serve as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. There was even a rumor that Alexander Pierce would be reappointed as director. After all, from the New York battle some time ago to the current S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters being almost destroyed, the ability shown by Nick Fury made them doubtful. Fuck Tony Stark. Some people are no better than me. You contacted me in a hurry in the middle of the night. I'm afraid you were warned by the other party. Nick Fury obviously knew that Tony Stark was secretly investigating Ronan. After all, this kind of thing is no longer a secret for people of his level. So what? I was not stepped on by others, nor was I played by others. It's not even possible that 3 people can beat 1 person. Tony Stark became more and more excited and started a range attack. Steve Rogers and others all turned black. What are you talking about? Who are you alluding to? So Tony, you called just to laugh at us? If there's nothing else, then hang up the phone. Steve Rogers retorted. If he didn't really know how to use Nick Fury's phone, he would have hung up the phone directly. Although Steve Rogers doesn't like to swear, it doesn't mean he has no temper. Wow. I didn't expect you to be here, Captain. From the rumors I heard, you weren't one of the 3 people who were defeated, were you? But after hearing Steve Rogers' voice, Tony Stark seemed even more excited. In a way, the 2 have always disliked each other. Steve Rogers couldn't stand Tony Stark's careless attitude. The latter, on the other hand, couldn't stand the former's attitude of I'm a colleague of your father, I'm older than you, and I know more than you. So, when encountering the other's ugly deeds, Tony Stark certainly won't let it go. Method. Tony, hang up if you're fine. We still have to discuss how to deal with that person. Steve Rogers took a deep breath and almost swore. He can accept being laughed at by anyone, but not by Tony Stark. This is the bottom line. If anyone dares to violate the bottom line, just wait and see. TSK TSK TSK. Forget it. Just pretend I didn't say anything. Also, respected director of S.H.I.E.L.D., next time can you tell the guards at your headquarters that when they see it's me, they don't need to call to report. As soon as Tony Stark finished speaking, another phone of Nick Fury rang. Nick Fury picked up the phone, and sure enough, it was the guard calling. Let him in. After hanging up the two phones at the same time, Nick Fury couldn't help but sigh. Each one was more difficult than the other, and he felt that he, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., was too tired. It's okay that the enemy is so cunning, but why are our own people like this? The other three people were also speechless by Tony Stark's mocking attack. This record is really hard to say. Just when several people were silent, the door of the office opened again, and Tony Stark walked in from outside. However, none of these people wanted to respond to him, and they didn't even want to say hello. Hey, guys. Why are you all so sad? Can't you live anymore? Although Tony Stark was in a bad mood, he laughed at these people, especially since Happy had passed the most dangerous period and was just waiting for the time to wake up. So now, all he wanted was revenge. Revenge on those people. Tony, you don't have to laugh at us. That guy came to you too, right? Nick Fury glanced at Tony Stark and said coldly. Obviously, he hadn't recovered from the previous stimulation. Tony Stark walked to an empty seat and sat down, throwing out a portable projector. The projector was pointed at the wall and the light turned on. Although he also came to me, my home is not like some people's offices, where they dare not install a camera. So, I helped you get his combat information. Are you going to thank me? Tony Stark leaned back in his chair and crossed his legs. He looked like he was bargaining. So, what do you want from me? Nick Fury's pupils shrank slightly. With a video of the battle, he could always find some clues. At the very least, he could analyze the opponent's attack pattern. I want to get all your research materials on occultism. Of course, you should know what I want when I say occultism. Let's be honest with each other. There's no need to play tricks. Tony Stark took off his sunglasses and spoke frankly for the first time. However, Nick Fury did not reply to him immediately. S.H.I.E.L.D. does have some information on this part, and some of it is still top secret. This includes the Pegasus project mentioned earlier. Back then, they confirmed the existence of aliens, and had discovered the Earth. As for other things, I'm afraid there won't be any clues. You want to use this video to exchange for these things. I'm afraid it's not enough. Nick Fury habitually began to bargain. Of course, I remember that there are some weapons made by the Cosmic Cube in your S.H.I.E.L.D.'s arsenal. I can help you transform them for free. In addition, I have another suggestion. Please order first. Please order all. Chapter 95. Change the name to Anti-MR. Fantastic Alliance. Please order first. Tony Stark was no fool. He would not agree to get the information with just a video. So, he threw out his second chip. Tell me about it. Nick Fury remained calm. I have already tested the fighting style of this Mr. Fantastic through Jarvis. Although Jarvis is not good at mysticism, but he still summed up some things. Tony Stark pressed a button on the projector and the video began to play. Playing at double speed, several people finished watching the video soon. When seeing Ronan suddenly appear and disappear in the video, Nick Fury seemed to recall everything he had experienced a few hours ago. That scene was simply unrecallable. I asked Jarvis to slow down this video, and I found a very important point. Tony Stark pressed the button again, and the content of the video began to change. The intercepted video was the scene of Ronan dismantling the Iron Man suit with his bare hands. Ronan appeared behind each Iron Man suit at an incredible speed, and then gently stroked the Iron Man suit with his palm. Then, the equipment that Tony Stark was proud of turned into a pile of parts. You mean, the other party used a special method to directly destroy your armor? Steve Rogers seemed to understand something. Although he didn't understand how the Iron Man suit was made, it was just a layer of armor after all. When the person in the video reached out and touched the armor immediately fell apart. This is a very scary thing. Yes, I also tested these disassembled armors. The internal structure was not damaged, but the connection of the armor was completely cut off. Captain, if there is no time limit for you, how long can you dismember these armors completely? In other words, can you do this without violent destruction? Tony Stark looked at Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers was silent, and after a long silence, he shook his head. It can be done, but it will take a long time. At least before that, you can make countless reactions to deal with me. His answer was obviously within Tony Stark's expectations. When he first got this result, he himself couldn't believe it, and tested it again. But the result was still the same. In other words, the other party has the ability to turn his proud iron armor into a pile of scrap metal within a second. Moreover, Tony Stark himself may not be able to fight back. This is a bit scary. In some records, some mysterious forces unknown to us may be able to do it. Nick Fury, who had been silent all the time, spoke up. After all, he knew the most secrets among the people present. Yes, there is another point that you may not have discovered. The process of that person moving. It looks like he is moving very fast. But in fact, after I slowed it down countless times, I found that the person is not fast at all. Instead, he did what we often see in science fiction novels: teleportation. Tony Stark closed his eyes, and it was obvious that he himself was a little desperate about this result. Hearing this, several people also took a breath of cold air. Teleportation? Isn't this something that only appears in myths and legends? If the opponent moves in the form of that golden portal, then they may have a way. For example, they can hold him back and prevent him from entering the portal. Or they can predict the location of another portal in advance and ambush him in advance. But if it is teleportation, then they have almost no chance of winning. So, have you figured out a way to deal with him? Nick Fury took a deep breath. He wanted to hear Tony Stark's conclusion. However, when Tony Stark heard this, he looked at Nick Fury with a very shocked look. As if to say, are you sick? What's wrong? You said so much, don't you want to deal with him? Nick Fury was very dissatisfied with Tony Stark's look. If you don't want to deal with him, why do you have to study so much? Looking for trouble? Of course I'm not doing it to deal with him. At least, with the current technology, we can't break through this space technology at all. You don't really want to deal with such a person? Tony Stark pulled the corner of his mouth. He felt that Nick Fury was whimsical. Teleportation? Let alone the current level of technology, even in a few decades or even 100 years, humans may not be able to break through this technology to solve this problem. Also, I don't think the other party is an enemy. At this time, Steve Rogers, who had been silent, spoke up. Not an enemy. He broke into the SHIELD office and killed so many of my agents, and he is not an enemy. Nick Fury could no longer contain his anger. How could he, Nick Fury, tolerate such a slap in the face? It was obviously you who investigated other people's privacy first, and then they came to your door. You don't think that you can investigate others, but others can only let you investigate silently, right? Tony Stark curled his lips, obviously disdainful of Nick Fury's behavior. In the past, he was also investigated by Nick Fury in this way. Even if he was not about to die, SHIELD would not even plan to take out the relics left to him by his father. Therefore, he has never had a good impression of Nick Fury, including SHIELD. Nick Fury was speechless for a while because of Tony Stark's words. Yes, he is only allowed to investigate others, but not others to fight back. Even in American law, it is very annoying to investigate others' privacy without authorization when the other party has not committed any crime. If he is not the director of SHIELD, such behavior would have been exposed by the media long ago. Now, Ronan knocked on their door and taught them a lesson. Nick Fury could only swallow his anger. This made him very unhappy. So, what do you want to express? Nick Fury took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. I think it's very simple. At least next time, when facing him, I won't feel powerless to resist. Even if I have a little power to fight back, it's what I need. Tony Stark said it firmly. The Avengers? Why not temporarily change the name to the Anti-MR? Fantastic Alliance. Chapter 96 He will kill people. Please order first. Tell me about your plan. Nick Fury crossed his hands and rested his chin on the back of his hands as if he was lost in thought. Tony Stark was right. If he couldn't get rid of the mysterious man, he should at least have some means of fighting back instead of letting others slaughter him. The wonderful Christmas Eve he experienced last night. I'm afraid that Nick Fury will feel cold sweats when he thinks back more than a decade later. It was just a little bit short. If the other party really wanted to kill him at that time, he would have no means of resistance at all. Even if he pressed the button before dying and contacted Captain Marvel. But what's the use? He is already dead, and they don't even know the other party's identity. Captain Marvel has all the power, but how can he avenge himself without knowing the other party's identity? Thinking of this, Nick Fury couldn't help but feel more and more uncomfortable. He couldn't go on like this. According to my idea, we actually have two choices. The first is to solve the problem at hand and find our current disadvantages. For example, we know nothing about him. Tony Stark pressed the button and switched Ronan's photo to the big screen. Of course, it was the one wearing the classic Iron Man suit. Whenever Tony Stark saw this photo, his heart would twitch violently. This suit of his was pieced together bit by bit from Tony Stark's many suits. It was because of this that all those Iron Man suits were turned into scrap metal by him. So, do you want me to investigate him again? Nick Fury's face changed. Tony Stark was simply talking about something irrelevant. I didn't expect that there was a person who almost had PTSD. Of course I didn't ask you to investigate, so I investigated. He threw a coffee cup at my house with a straw on it, so I hacked into the criminal database and compared the DNA on it. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any criminal record. Tony Stark shrugged, but his eyes looked at Nick Fury. Of course, Nick Fury didn't react at all. It seems that he has become accustomed to these behaviors of Tony Stark. If I'm not mistaken, SHIELD has also been secretly collecting DNA from its citizens. So, I also hacked into SHIELD's network system and compared it. Unfortunately, there is no matching DNA in your SHIELD. Nick Fury felt his eyelids twitch, and he suddenly remembered that Tony Stark had hacked into the SHIELD database on the Sky Fortress some time ago. Now, it seems that he has become accustomed to it. So, you don't want to condemn us for excessively collecting DNA like those journalists do. Nick Fury's face was not very good. Those things are only the responsibility of journalists and have nothing to do with me. But, can we analyze something from this point? At least the person we met has no criminal record, has not had his DNA collected by SHIELD, and has not even left any reports of his own blood tests in hospitals across the country. If that's the case, what possibilities do you think of? Tony Stark said his final thoughts. Hearing this, Nick Fury narrowed his eyes, as if he had thought of something. In our database, except for some very conservative states, all have established cooperation with us. Whether it is a student, teacher, researcher, or even if he has been to the hospital, his DNA will be recorded. So, there are only two possibilities. Either this person has left schools and government departments since the establishment of S.H.I.E.L.D. Even his health is so good that he has never been to the hospital. Or, this person is a pure foreigner. Nick Fury did not deliberately conceal the dark history of S.H.I.E.L.D. Of course, he also knew that in front of these people, these so-called dark histories were nothing at all. It was nothing more than collecting DNA. The DNA of these people in front of him had long been in the S.H.I.E.L.D. database. But the confidentiality was very high. In other words, the first one is almost impossible. He is most likely a foreigner. Steve Rogers, who had been silent all the time, spoke. However, Nick Fury shook his head. In China, there are a group of people who still don't believe in science. They think that science and technology are poisoning our future and will bring down divine punishment sooner or later. They also showed up during the alien invasion some time ago. According to them, it was the development of our technology that attracted the aliens' covetousness, so this happened. Even this statement has gained support from many people now. This group of people refuses to accept hospitals and all technological products. They still live in the old times. So, we can't collect their DNA either. Nick Fury shook his head and continued, counting these people, plus the number of people in those conservative states, it will almost reach millions. Based on this alone, it is difficult for us to find out the other party's identity through DNA. With this, the things that were originally a little hopeful were instantly turned into ashes. However, Tony Stark did not seem to be depressed at all. But, something else happened tonight. You should know about the explosion in New York, right? I met him there. Tony Stark took a deep breath and remembered the scene he saw at the explosion site. In addition to that person, there is also Spider-Man who has recently become famous. What do you mean? What does the explosion have to do with him? Nick Fury frowned. If that's the case, things would be very complicated. A mysterious figure, plus a terrorist, it's hard to deal with him, no matter how you think about it. No, the situation at that time was that he received a call and immediately gave up fighting with me, chose to go to the explosion site, and saved a whole floor of people. So I can infer that among the people at the explosion site that day, there was one who had a very close relationship with him. You can even say that the relationship was very good. As long as we find that person, we may also have new clues about his identity. The more he talked, the happier Tony Stark's face became. Because they found the most critical point. You mean, his DNA may be related to the DNA of someone at the scene, and the other party may be a close relative or a close friend. Nick Fury's eyes lit up. If Mr. Fantastic really has a relationship with the people at the explosion site, then through DNA comparison, maybe the other party's identity can really be found. Even if they are not close relatives, it can at least prove that there are people among those people who he cares about very much. Thinking of this, Nick Fury couldn't help but stand up. However, at this time, Steve Rogers spoke again. Aren't you afraid that the clues revealed during the investigation will be discovered by the other party again? Then, he will find you again. If I guess correctly, if he finds you next time, I'm afraid it will be completely different from this warning. The other party is not an ordinary person, and he is even someone we can't deal with at all. The most important thing is he will kill people. Chapter 97. Facing him, we can only passively defend. Please order first. Steve Rogers' words made Nick Fury, who had just stood up, sit down again. Just this one sentence made Nick Fury calm down again. He remembered that the other party said before he left that no matter who investigated his identity, he would eventually blame S.H.I.E.L.D. Looking at the other party's appearance at that time, it didn't seem like he was joking. Moreover, as Steve Rogers said, the other party would kill people. What if the other party came to the door again at that time? Then, thinking of this, Nick Fury couldn't help but touch his thigh. The pain in his thigh was telling him that he must calm down again and again. So, our plan has entered the second stage. How to defend against the opponent. At this time, Tony Stark has fallen into the mentality of revenge. Of course, his revenge is not the same concept as the revenge against the bomber. The former was because he lost face in front of his lover. The other party made him so embarrassed. This made Tony Stark feel very embarrassed. Therefore, Tony Stark, who was severely tricked, must make the other party suffer a setback. This is Tony Stark's character. It seems you have an idea too. Steve Rogers looked at Tony Stark. Although the two of them looked down on each other, Steve Rogers had to admit that Tony Stark was still the best one in the other's professional field. At least, he was one of the top few. I have observed the way he disappears and appears. He moves in an unpredictable way. Since we can't predict the other party's actions, let's make every move of the other party under our control. For example, like this. Tony Stark pressed the button in his hand, and the screen changed again. On the screen, a demonstration plan similar to an animation appeared. A person suddenly appeared at a certain point, and the ground under his feet lit up. Then the other party went to another point at a very fast speed, and the ground under his feet lit up again. This is similar to a sensing device. The opponent is still a human being. No matter how powerful he is, he cannot change this fact. If he is a human being, there will be a way to deal with the opponent. For example, no matter how fast he is, when he stops, he still cannot violate the principle of gravity. As long as he is a human being, he will have body temperature, and the thermal imaging device will detect the opponent's reaction. So, as long as we are in a closed space and full of similar devices, we can detect his moving position in advance. From this point of view, we have completed the first step of defending the opponent. This is also the most critical step. If you can't detect the opponent's moving position, then no matter how powerful the weapon is, if it can't hit the opponent, it will be no different from scrap metal. Therefore, this step is very critical. But even if you detect the opponent's moving position, can you beat him? In my opinion, it's very difficult. Steve Rogers shook his head. He couldn't agree with this concept. Because he had fought with the opponent, and everyone knew the result of the battle. It can be said to be a disastrous defeat. What's the use of being able to predict the opponent's movements? Isn't it still beaten to a pulp? Black Widow and Hawkeye also nodded on the side, and they were deeply touched by this. What if we replace similar induction with some other weapons? For example, electric shock, fire, or other attack methods. Anyway, as soon as the opponent lands, he will be attacked. And we only need to press a button to change the ground. Isn't this foolproof? Tony Stark shrugged. This was the most perfect plan he could think of in a short period of time. After listening to it, several people were silent. It sounds like this idea is very effective. However, no one knows how effective it will be in actual application. More importantly, there is another point they have not considered. What about the opponent's magician-like attack method? Do you have any solution? Nick Fury said a point that they have always overlooked. Their so-called defense is based on the premise that the opponent will not use magic attacks. Once the opponent uses magic attacks, their so-called defense methods will lose all their effects. Therefore, this method can only be regarded as a 50% chance of success. That's why I asked you for those occult materials in the beginning. In the final analysis, we still need to have means to deal with the other party's magical attacks. Otherwise, no matter how many ideas we have, it's just a barely defensive measure. At this point, Tony Stark, who had been somewhat passionate, slowly calmed down. Because these are objective facts, no one can tell whether the other party is an enemy or a friend. Because the other party once helped them fight against aliens, but also had conflicts with them, although they were wrong first. However, people who made mistakes rarely admit their mistakes voluntarily. They think more about pushing the source of the mistake to the other party, so that everyone thinks that the other party made the mistake first. This is how humans are. Nick Fury is the same. Okay, I can share some occult materials with you, but in return, you have to study a set of this thing and put it in our office. And, you have to share a copy of your research on occultism with SHIELD. Nick Fury took a deep breath and put forward his request. Whether it is an enemy or a friend, he must have corresponding defensive means. Because even though the people around him were all his own people, Nick Fury had ways to restrict them. This was him, Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Tony Stark glanced at him, thought for a few seconds, and finally nodded. Of course, in the end, if anything was researched and shared with S.H.I.E.L.D., it would still be Tony Stark who had the final say. However, their pleasant transaction was interrupted by Steve Rogers. Sorry, both of you, up to now, I still don't think the other party is an enemy. Maybe I'm too old-fashioned, but in my opinion, it's very normal for you to pry into other people's secrets and incur revenge from others. At least in the army of my time, if you encounter such a thing, soldiers are allowed to fight back. So, I don't plan to participate in this plan. After saying that, Steve Rogers stood up, nodded slightly to a few people, and then turned and left. Nick Fury's face was a little gloomy. Captain America is good, but he is not the subordinate he wants. Because Steve Rogers has too many ideas of his own. Soldiers should obey orders, no matter whether the superior is right or wrong. Chapter 98. Learn a new spell. Please subscribe first. Please give me a monthly ticket. As Ronan expected, the nickname Mr. Fantastic spread throughout New York the next morning. In addition to Mr. Fantastic's true identity, the front page headlines of most New York newspapers were that Tony Stark's bodyguards were attacked in the explosion. Some people speculated that Mr. Fantastic was actually Tony Stark's small trumpet. After all, the other party was also wearing Tony Stark's iron armor. The only person in this world who has an iron armor is Tony Stark. However, Tony Stark did not admit or deny it. He was blocked at the door of the hospital the night before, but instead declared war on the person who dropped the bomb. He not only announced his home address, but also threw away a person's mobile phone. In the end, while successfully attracting most of the firepower, he also had 2 more prosecution cases. In addition to the reporter's mobile phone, 2 other people jointly accused Tony Stark of beating them. It's just that Tony Stark doesn't care about these things at all. Of course, in addition to Tony Stark, SHIELD has also entered a stage of adjustment. According to Nick Fury's order, the investigation of some mysterious figures has come to a temporary end. Before Tony Stark's research has taken shape, he doesn't want to have another Christmas experience. If it weren't for the agreement with Captain Marvel at the time, Nick Fury could only call her when there was a major disaster on the Earth. Otherwise, Nick Fury really wanted to contact Captain Marvel to support himself. As the initiator of this incident, Ronan was now in a training ground in Kamar-Taj, practicing some new spells with Wang. According to the Ancient One, Ronan can now access higher level spells. Moreover, the library of Kamar-Taj can now be fully opened to Ronan, and he can read all the books, including those books that have been banned. Although most people were not surprised when this news came out, some people still expressed dissatisfaction with it. This part of people is none other than Cassilis and his small team. According to them, since it is a banned book, why can Ronan read it, but Cassilis can't? And the Ancient One's statement on this is that Ronan is the next supreme sorcerer, and Cassilis is not. Just this one sentence made Cassilis speechless. Jealousy began to grow wildly again in the invisible gap. Of course, Ronan could see it, and so could Ancient One. For Wang, he didn't care. The reason was very simple. Now he had fallen in love, especially after that night. The artillery fire on Christmas Eve also affected him, allowing him to experience what American goods were. Of course, Ronan didn't know who won or lost in the artillery battle. For Wang, who was in love, Ronan expressed his blessings to him every day. Although he vaguely remembered that in the subsequent plot of Marvel, Wang did have a girlfriend and even got married. However, that was also during the period when Wang served as a supreme sorcerer. Unexpectedly, the two fell in love at this time. So, Wang, before teaching me magic, do you want to thank me? Ronan leaned on Wang's shoulders with his right hands and said with a smile. That night, Ronan's godly assist was definitely effective. Wang worked as a gunner for the whole night, and Ronan received $150 in pocket money. Both of them have a bright future, which can be called a win-win situation. Is there a possibility that I can do without you? Besides, you have already extorted $50 from me. How do you want me to thank you? Wang glanced at Ronan and couldn't help curling his lips. That's $50. More importantly, the secret he had hidden deep in his heart was actually revealed by Ronan. Don't say I look down on you. Looking at your state, you must have been together for a while. If I guess correctly, you haven't been humming and ahhing before, right? Ronan looked at Wang with contempt. Why do people like to be stubborn? Isn't it better to admit it honestly? You are a 16-year-old young man, and you know a lot. Since you know so much, why are you still single? Wang issued a soul attack. Ronan's face darkened, and he pushed Wang away and snorted coldly. As the next supreme sorcerer, I cannot fall in love for myself and for others. And haven't you heard a saying? A wise man does not fall in love, but a fool repeats the same mistakes. You are a person who repeats the same mistakes. However, although Ronan said such truthful words, from the expression of the king, he only wanted to express one meaning. You are being stubborn. But Ronan would never admit it. Being stubborn has never belonged to him. Forget it. Tell me which trick you want to learn. I have an appointment with Sarah later. We have to make up for the Christmas dinner that night tonight. The king did not intend to waste time with Ronan. Ronan pulled the corner of his mouth and almost fell down in one breath. Damn. You are feeding dog food here. Damn it. I want to learn the journey of Icon, the shield of Sifenla, the wind of Vatum, and the thunder of Bosset. Ronan said 4 powerful spells in one breath. Each of these spells is very powerful. Some are Kamar-Taj's strongest defense, and some are Kamar-Taj's strongest attack. Of course, the so-called strongest is also divided into stages. For Wang, these spells are already his strongest spells. Why didn't you say you still wanted to learn the holy sword of Vishanti? I don't have that much time. I said I have a date tonight. Wang took a deep breath. He regretted accepting such a task. Wouldn't it be better to refuse it from Ancient One and give this task to Mordo? Can I still learn the Holy Sword of Vishanti? Ronan's face lit up. You know, this move is relatively speaking one of the second highest level spells. I'm afraid only Ancient One can do it. Get out. Can't you hear what this sentence means? Wang couldn't help but yelled. His original intention was to mock Ronan for being greedy and wanting to learn everything. If it was so easy to learn, how could Ancient One let Ronan learn these spells now? However, what he didn't expect was that Ronan actually climbed up the ladder. TSK, to put it bluntly, you don't know how to do it, right? Forget it. Let's learn Journey to Icon first. We'll learn other spells based on the remaining time. Ronan curled his lips, seeing through Wang's thoughts at a glance. However, Ronan was very much looking forward to what effect Journey to Icon would have if it was added with +1. At that time, could he use his clone to help him do his homework? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 99, Form of Icon +1. Please give me a monthly ticket. Please subscribe. In fact, the magic of Kamatage is not easy to learn. Although your magic power is borrowed from Vishanti, how to operate the borrowed magic power and how to draw the runes are the difficulties in learning magic. Of course, it is not that difficult for Ronan. The king just said the key points of the form of Icon once and then cast it for Ronan. But just once, Ronan successfully split a clone. Although there was only one clone, the king's jaw dropped and could no longer close. Because next, Ronan used this move very skillfully the second and third times. Especially the fourth time. When Ronan made a seal with his hands in front of his chest, countless clones flew out from behind him, and almost every clone perfectly portrayed Ronan's stunning beauty. Looking at the clones standing in a row, Ronan nodded with great satisfaction. Apart from anything else, just this appearance, it is definitely a rich woman killer. At the same time, this move also appeared on Ronan's system. Shape of Icon. Use magic power to split into countless clones of the main body. The clones have entities and can use the spells cast by the main body at the same time. The number of clones is determined by the magic power consumed. How should I put it? The effect of this move was within Ronan's expectations. It is not strong, but definitely not weak. The reason why Ronan said this move is not strong is that when facing a strong enemy, even if these clones have entities, they will probably be shattered in one blow. Because the introduction did not say that it would replicate the user's physical fitness. This is very important. The move of Shape of Icon is the kind of move that is invincible when bullying weak enemies and can delay a strong conversation for a while. Therefore, Ronan put his last bit of skill points on this move without reservation. I saw the familiar light appear again, and the skill points also changed from 1 to 0. As the light disappeared, a brand new Shape of Icon appeared. Shape of Icon +1. Use magic power to split into countless clones of the main body. The clones have entities and can use the spells cast by the main body at the same time. The number of clones is determined by the magic power consumed. +1 characteristic. Can summon soul clones that inherit 80% of the original body's physical attributes, and the current upper limit is 3. The upper limit is determined by the host's magic power and mental power. At the same time, the 3 soul clones with integrated physical attributes can communicate with the original body and have wisdom and thinking ability. After the soul clone is summoned, it will continue to consume the original body's magic power and mental power. Similarly, the clone can share the original body's mental power, and the specific amount is adjusted by the original body, up to 50%. When seeing the several lines of +1 characteristics, Ronan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. A weakened version of the multiple shadow clones in a certain anime? No, it shouldn't be said that way. In that anime, the shadow clones also have their own unique thoughts, and they are all entities. Every time a clone is separated, a part of the original body's chakra will be separated. The clones can be cultivated, and after the clone disappears, the progress of cultivation can be fed back to the original body. There is no doubt that this is a very bug ability. From this point of view, the upgraded version of the Econ form seems to be much weaker than other people's clones. But in fact, it is not so absolute. Although the shadow clone can practice on its own and speed up the progress of the main body's practice, the fatigue, damage, and even pain it suffers will also be transmitted to the main body. If it weren't for a certain yellow-haired man who inherited the overly strong chakra from his mother and had the bug level healing buff of the nine-tailed fox, he would have been killed by the side effects of this move. More importantly, the move of the Ache form does not require Ronan to consume magic power. All the clone's magic power also comes from Vishanti, which ensures that Ronan will not be short of mana. As for the soul clone's need to consume its own magic power, Ronan narrowed his eyes and separated a soul clone. He could clearly sense that after the soul clone appeared, his own magic power and mental power began to slowly consume. As the system said, this is not a one-time consumption, but a quantitative consumption, based on the existence of the soul clone. However, the consumed magic power is neither too much nor too little. If it is just a clone, according to Ronan's estimation, he can last for 7 days. If Ronan uses meditation to restore his magic power, the length can be extended again. It seems that the upper limit of the number seems to be limited by his own magic power. Ronan touched his chin. In fact, before this, he had never understood one thing. According to Kamataj, the magic power used in all their spells comes from Vishanti. But Ronan is different. Since Ronan added points to meditation, another magic power has appeared in his body. However, he has never had the opportunity to use this magic power before. But now it seems different. After the upgrade of the form of Icon, Ronan's magic power needs to be consumed. In other words, if his skills continue to upgrade, does it mean that he can further break away from the system of Kamataj? Borrow when you want to borrow, and don't borrow when you don't want to borrow. You will no longer be controlled by others. Thinking of this, Ronan couldn't help but brighten up. Although Vishanti is not stingy in lending them magic power, but Ronan understands one thing. If there is no conflict of interest, perhaps everything will be fine. In case something goes wrong. Therefore, it is more important to leave yourself a way out. Of course, it was too early for Ronan to think about this now. In Vishanti's eyes, Ronan might not be much different from an ant now. After figuring this out, Ronan began to continue experimenting with his clone. He transferred half of his mental power to the clone. But to his disappointment, the clone did not show any special appearance and remained the same. The IQ did not improve, and there was no scene like in the novel where a gleam of light suddenly appeared in the eyes. Is it necessary to upgrade it to another level? Ronan pulled the corner of his mouth. Could it be that his rubbish system has learned the tricks of CPU manufacturers? Squeezing toothpaste every year and upgrading every year? Ronan spat, but could only sigh. He took a look at the up to 9 level in his system and couldn't help but take a deep breath. Upgrade it to another level. Upgrade it to another level, and you can get the second special skill. In addition, what made Ronan a little regretful was that, although the soul clone inherited 80% of his physical fitness, and could also share his mental power, but the tricks in the system could not be used. The magic power that the clone can use also comes from Vishanti's magic power. Therefore, the only spells that the clone can use are those of Kamataj. But this is not bad. The spells of Kamataj are also very powerful, and the clone can synchronize the spells learned by Ronan. This alone is enough. Of course, Ronan didn't expect so much at the beginning. He just wanted to know if he could let the clone do his homework by adding points after learning the form of Icon. Now it seems that the clone can not only help him do his homework, but also 3 clones can do his homework at a time. In other words, from now on, Ronan doesn't have to worry about his homework at all. Ronan is happy. But the king on the side is full of frustration. You know, when he learned this trick, it took him an unknown amount of time. But now, Ronan in front of him only took less than half an hour. Although before this, he had a preliminary psychological preparation for Ronan's learning ability. However, when he experienced it in person, the picture of breaking through cognition was really hard to accept. What's wrong, Wang? Do you feel inferior? Ronan patted Wang on the shoulder and smiled at him with ill intentions. Ronan also successfully responded to the previous ridicule of being a single dog. This response can be called a great success. Go away. Since you have learned it, then I will leave. There are still a few hours before the date. I have to go and get ready. After saying that, Wang broke free from Ronan's arm, opened the door of the secret law, and prepared to slip away. But how could Ronan let him go? Ronan finally had a chance to learn a new spell, and he would not let it end like this. Don't be anxious, Luo Wang, we have just started. Why don't we study it again? Which one is stronger, the shield of Sifenra or the thunder of Bossert? Also, how to solve the practicality problem of the wind of Watum. Let's continue to discuss it. I'm going to have breakfast. I have had a cold for 2 days and I haven't slept well for 2 nights. I'm almost uncomfortable. Please ask for monthly tickets and subscriptions. Chapter 100 Mr. Stark exploded. 7th update. Please give me a monthly ticket. A few days later, when the northern hemisphere ushered in heavy snow, Ronan was lying on a beach, enjoying the sun, the beach and the beauties. At this time, he was on a small island in the southern hemisphere, enjoying one of the few holidays. In another week, he would start school again. In order to make this holiday meaningful, Ronan decisively abandoned the cold America and came to this small island in the southern hemisphere, where spring was still in full bloom. There was no need to apply for a visa, no plane tickets and other factors. Ronan only needed a small portal to come here. This is also a benefit for the Camotage wizard. After all, they went far away, but never bought plane tickets. Ronan wore sunglasses and lay on a chair on the beach, looking at the bikini girls passing by one after another with an expressionless face. Whether it was a 3-point style, a conservative jumpsuit, or a jumpsuit, Ronan ignored them. For these pink skeletons, Ronan just turned sideways and folded his right leg over his left leg. In broad daylight, how can you dress like this? Some of them are even naked. Ugh. Pa. Slurp. You are mean. At this moment, the phone beside the table rang, interrupting Ronan's voice of angrily denouncing the unhealthy trend. Ronan picked up the phone and found that it was a call from an unfamiliar American number. After thinking for a while, he answered the phone. Hello, hello. However, after he answered the phone, he regretted it, because the voice coming from the other end of the phone was none other than Peter Parker, whom he met a few days ago. Ronan, do you know what I found a few days ago? At an explosion site, I saw another person who could open the golden door just like that day. He claimed to be Mr. Stark's artificial intelligence, but I don't think he is. Peter Parker's voice rang. From his tone, he seemed to be very excited about this discovery. Ronan pulled the corner of his mouth. He was practicing a few days ago, and his phone was turned off. Unexpectedly, he just came on vacation today and turned on his phone, and Peter Parker called him. He didn't believe that Peter Parker could be so stupid. The words I made up a few days ago were full of loopholes. Of course, it can't be said that they were full of loopholes, but Tony Stark just happened to point them out one by one. Anyway, no matter what, when they meet again next time, Ronan will make Tony Stark pay the price. People who can make Ronan feel embarrassed usually don't have a good ending. Mr. Stark. Is that Tony Stark? Also, what about the explosion? Ronan rolled his eyes and decided to pretend that he knew nothing. Anyway, his temporary tactic is to be ignorant of everything and not reveal any flaws. Didn't you watch the news? There was an explosion in downtown New York a few nights ago, and many people were swept into it. Peter Parker paused, as if he didn't expect Ronan to answer like this. I really don't know. I'm abroad now, on vacation with my family. I don't care about the situation in New York. Ronan naturally knew what happened, but could he say it? Obviously not. Anyway, he just had to play the role of an ordinary high school student traveling abroad. Saving the world, and so on had little to do with him. You weren't in New York yesterday. For some reason, Peter Parker's tone was full of disappointment. It was like a test paper filled with wrong answers. In fact, Ronan knew why. Everything came from Peter Parker's heart, not. Since being bitten by a spider, Peter Parker, who gained the ability of a spider, changed from an ordinary high school student to Spider-Man, a good neighbor in New York. This made him experience a completely new and different life. But over time, after the initial stage, after he had adapted to his abilities, a different emotion appeared in his heart. That emotion is called panic. Yes, panic. Because from the perspective of normal people, his ability can be called a mutation. Whether it is Iron Man or Captain America, their abilities are changed by technology. It's just that the former uses technological armor, and the latter uses technological potions. But people like Peter Parker are actually very few. So sometimes Peter Parker would think that he would be a freak. He was eager to find a kindred, until he found Ronan. In the final analysis, his emotions are all because he has not gotten rid of the mentality of an ordinary person. To transform from an ordinary person into a superhero, psychological construction is also required. However, neither the last confession nor the temptation this time allowed him to get the answer he wanted from Ronan. This undoubtedly made him a little disappointed. He wanted a kind, and was going crazy. Yes, I'm not in New York, but I seem to have seen Spider-Man in the video recording. Ronan deliberately paused, and did not reveal Peter Parker's identity. He knew that his own phone could not be monitored by anyone, because some technological means have been used to detect it. Otherwise the Ancient One would not have given it to him. As for Peter Parker's mobile phone, Ronan was not sure. With the nature of the American government, nothing can be said for sure. Yes, Spider-Man was also at the scene. But it seems that he didn't save many people. Peter Parker seemed to have thought of something, and did not reveal his true identity. Peter, you can't think like that. I'm a big fan of Spider-Man. I always think he's doing well, and he's very suitable for the nickname New York Good Neighbor. At least in my opinion, he's doing much better than Tony Stark, that tough-talking boy. Oh, yes, he's still a tough-talking egomaniac with anxiety. Ronan curled his lips, and it was obvious that he was more optimistic about Peter Parker. In the previous life, people said that Peter Parker suddenly became arrogant after he had superpowers, which led to a series of things, including his relatives and girlfriend. But in fact, Tony Stark's mistakes are even more outrageous than Peter Parker's. He is even 2 or 3 times older than Peter Parker. Just from this point of view, there is no doubt that Peter Parker is not childish at all. Really? Peter Parker asked in surprise. Ahem, of course. Tony Stark owns the entire Stark group, but he can't protect so many people. But Spider-Man comes from the community, and he is also protecting the community. I think he is doing 10,000 times better than Tony Stark. Ronan gave Peter Parker a thumbs up from a distance. This statement is not completely a lie. After all, Peter Parker has always been a civilian version of a superhero. At least from this point of view, Peter Parker is indeed better than Tony Stark. Thank you. Oh, I mean, as a fan of Spider-Man, I don't think he has done that well. Mr. Stark is still the more powerful one. And, holy shit, I'm too. Mr. Stark exploded. The 7th update today. Please vote for me. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.